The enormous doors of the 100th floor of the tower finally opened before the brave heroine. Hundreds of hunters perished trying to reach the last floor of the tower, where every level is harder. All this time, the girl walked side by side with the other hunters, overcoming the difficulties along the way. In the end, and to her misfortune, all her companions died, leaving her alone alive as an S-rank hunter. Kim turned around upon hearing the hoarse voice of the man who had become her enemy. He turned out to be a traitor. It was the owner of the tower, whom she nicknamed the repulsive scoundrel who stole corpses. Despite his bloodied appearance, he walked with a firm step towards his rival, transforming his own hand. Activating his fear incarnation ability, he quickly attacked the girl with enormous snakes. Stepping back from the danger zone, the girl activated a special ability and with new strength struck the monster's mouth. The huntress split him in half and plummeted, crashing against a rock at the end of her flight. It was clear she was fed up with this life, where she died and was reborn again and again to return to the tower. After being reborn about 60 times, she finally remembered everything and was ready to break this vicious cycle. The huntress and the tower owner continued their very long and painful battle, using all kinds of techniques. Seeing how the man summoned his terrifying monsters, she also activated her ability, reflecting the attack. Remembering every attack helped the girl enormously, so much so that she soon started dreaming about them. Trapped time and time again on the different floors of the tower, the huntress stood firm until the end. After feeling so many lost lives, every move the enemy made seemed predictable to her, and understandable. Finally, brandishing her sword, she fervently begged herself to be able to escape this hell and return home. The tower owner could not withstand her charge and was forced to fall, seriously wounded. Before he could recover from the blow, he was caught in strong chains tightening around his limbs and his neck. He tried to reach Kim, calling her by name, but it didn't affect her, and she pierced him with her weapon. With a look full of hatred, she told him that the one he was calling was dead and that he should get out of her life. Drawing her sword, Kim couldn't believe she had finally managed to end everything. Her eyes shone with joy when a virtual notification appeared stating that the Lord of the Tower had fallen. But she couldn't relax. The enemy's remains moved, screaming in agony that he could not lose against a human. She, sarcastically, asked what grand plan he was referring to, listening to his sad words in agony. The girl, ironically, called him unoriginal upon realizing that world domination was his grand plan. Everything she lived was just a game, at the end of which she said goodbye to the crying creature as if it were an actor. After exchanging words with the other players, she calmly declared that it was time to go home. Kim ended the conversation, saying with a smile that her dog was waiting for her, and that it must miss her a lot. An image of her spending time with the dog, bewitched to forget its weight, shone in her mind. She smiled with conviction, accepting that was all she hoped for, yearning to return home and see her as soon as possible. Upon hearing his promise of revenge, Kim called him stubborn and wished to get revenge on the unoriginal author. To her surprise, a monster materialized behind her, vowing to destroy her dream in exchange for what she destroyed. Refusing to listen to him, the girl trampled on his remains, condemning him for all the murders and atrocities he committed. The monster enveloped her again, promising revenge in the next life and leaving her trapped there forever. Crushing him again, Kim only concluded that the mission was complete and it was time to leave. She collapsed exhausted on the floor and ordered her invisible companions to rest. Opening the mission window, the girl expected the deserved rewards, but only found a system alert about inexplicable failures. She kept trying to activate the virtual window frantically, but encountered system rejection time and time again. And again, Kim, furious, demanded to be returned and given her rewards. Without understanding the update, her eyes widened in shock when she saw an announcement that a new work by the current author was loading. She tried to understand the strange title, but was stunned to see that the download had finished. Kim understood nothing when reading that. Due to a system error, her rewards had changed. Finally, she looked dazedly at the notification that she had reincarnated as the heroine of another novel. Raising her sword, Kim demanded to see those responsible, refusing to accept that she would not return to her world. Feeling she was losing her sanity, she brandished her sword, wishing to see the author of all this. Before striking the hologram, a blinding light enveloped her. The romance sequel was loading. In reality, the girl was in the world of a work where the superior rank hunter gets stronger by being reborn. Before arriving in this fictional world, she was a normal girl preparing for the civil service exam. On that fateful day, after 4 years of waiting, Kim celebrated passing with dinner out. Absorbed in her phone, the young woman did not see the car rushing towards her. A terrible mistake. Upon dying, she appeared in a strange simulation, announcing her reincarnation into her favorite novel. With the knowledge of the novel, she overcame impossible dungeons, where others didn't even dare to enter. As the best huntress, she obtained unique skills and rare constellations, mastering them perfectly. Despite her immense power, she could not defeat the final boss. He was simply too strong for her. The crucial problem was that the novel was unfinished, preventing her from predicting his weak points. Suddenly, in the body of a princess, both the girl and her constellations were completely perplexed. Only one of the 3 constellations, the Lord of Seduction, was happy about where they were, because he already knew the place. In a dungeon, she became enraged upon seeing that, instead of a reward, they had sent her to another novel. What truly exhausted her was not having read the novel. And now she had to open the mission window. She discovered that she was now the villain Renee Marcy's, daughter of the Empire's most powerful warrior. And she only had 1 month to complete the task. Although she now had some system instructions, she remained displeased. She hated the romance genre. Feeling the lack of strength in her hands, she summoned the status window, where there was no clear information about her powers or health. The girl's constellations were also in an undefined position, making her situation even worse. She was surprised by such vague indicators. She was used to the system always showing maximum precision. After analyzing the frequent system failures, the girl concluded that her reincarnation was not planned. These thoughts led her to realize that it was the work of the tower owner, whose curse was so powerful that it caused failures. Getting up from her seat, she firmly decided that it wasn't worth sitting around thinking in captivity. She had to start completing the mission. The girl clearly understood the need to leave the dungeon to escape this body. Noticing the unusual euphoria of the Lord of Temptation, she severely questioned him about what he knew of that world. She was perplexed to hear that this world was connected to her homeland, the demon realm. Putting the details aside, she asked him to check if anyone's stats had changed, and she received an ambiguous answer. The constellations shared their observations about the altered strength, but agreed that the changes were minor. Nevertheless, the heroine's own abilities were slightly worse than before, something that made her reflect, gripping the bars. She had barely thought about the unknown standards of this world when she suddenly ripped the grate with the stone with an agile movement. The young woman felt euphoric, realizing she didn't have to worry about her strength at all. Her father, Duke Marsiz, was the only duke in the Empire famous for his swordsmanship. His lineage faced an imminent threat of downfall due to an issue related to the Holy Empire. The Crown Prince's fiancée, Lion Crosses, a lady of the Kandal family, suddenly disappeared on the outskirts of the city, causing a real stir. The main suspect turned out to be the Empire's worst villain, abandoned by her family, Renee Marcy. Hearing an unusual sound, the heir before Marcy burst into the cell, ordering everyone to prepare for battle. The second son of Duke Marcy, Kirill, became tense, feeling the tension floating in the air. After agreeing to attack on the count of 3, they opened the prison door, ready to charge forward. They were stunned to see Renee standing, greeting them all cheerfully. Once in the palace, the brothers cornered her, trying to find out who had freed her from the cell. Renee stated directly that she had escaped alone, and then sat down visibly annoyed. Not wanting to waste time, full of indignation, Auntie insisted that she reveal the name of her accomplice, which further enraged the girl. Trying to read information about her brother in the system window, Renee was disconcerted to see that it was malfunctioning. She looked at a thoughtful Kirill, who told her she wasn't listening, and then she noticed the same failures. Despite the glitches, the system clearly indicated that her affinity towards her was practically nil. Upon seeing the successful escape notification, Renee discovered a new mission that had just appeared. The girl felt a real shock upon understanding that they demanded she radically improve her relationship with her brothers. Determined to move forward as soon as possible, she sketched a sweet smile and thanked them for their concern. It was clear it didn't produce the desired effect, because they reacted very negatively to her sudden change in attitude. Trying to change the subject, the young woman stated that she only said it because she didn't fully understand the situation. The men tensed upon hearing her direct question about why they thought she had murdered the saint. reminding her how she always talked about her desire to get rid of Lady Carey's, her brother. Impulsive, threw hot tea at her. After throwing the tableware, the man almost lunged at her, adding that because of the lady's disappearance in their territory, everyone suspected her. Renee glared at him, hearing that she was a disgrace who had buried her family's honor. The girl, as if nothing happened, asked if there was proof, and he replied that she had also hidden it. And the body, without yielding to his pressure, asked a key question. Did you really not find absolutely anything? To everyone's surprise, Auntie calmed down and decreed that her envy towards Karis was reason enough for the crime. He covered his face with his hand, tense, and asked rhetorically, who else could kill such an innocent person? In his mind appeared the image of an innocent saint, delicate as a flower, greeting him with a smile. The men insisted, saying that if she confessed, the crown prince might forgive her before the trial. Renee twirled a strand of hair, trying to understand why they were talking about the crown prince, and not the emperor. Auntie didn't understand the girl's reaction, so he reminded her that the crown prince was personally overseeing the case. Renee understood that it was all a farce when, upon hearing his question, he asked her if she thought His Majesty liked her. The second brother ordered her to forget the idea of replacing the crown prince's fiancé. After 3 years, that sentence enlightened her. Her character loved that guy so much that she tried to kill the fiancé several times. Her mind already saw the dark ending. At some point, she would succeed. What a dire fate. Analyzing the mission, something didn't add up. They accused her, but without evidence. What plot is hidden here? Renee understood everything. The mission system never lies. It only hides the truth behind a veil. She gave them back the hope of being heard. She captured their attention and ordered, "Listen to me carefully." Before that, he rubbed his forehead, exhausted. His sister dropped the bomb. Lion Karis might have run away on her own. They dismissed her idea immediately. She was going to marry the crown prince in a month. Impossible. To the rhetorical question, who would run away like that before their wedding? She leaned in, ready to reveal the truth. Renee shocked them with her unusual theory. Maybe she fled because she didn't want to get married, plain and simple. The older brother burst out again. A saint wouldn't throw such tantrums like a spoiled child, please. The younger brother couldn't help but laugh when she responded mockingly that with that kindness and naivety, she wouldn't get far. Renee was thrilled to see Kiril's reaction. It was clearly better than she expected. Furious, Auntie asked what she meant by the saint having suffered a lot. The girl dramatically shared her version, where the saint couldn't refuse and fled because the crown prince was terrible. Finally, she smiled maliciously, asking why he wouldn't go see the prince himself and find out. In the end, she got her way, as shown by the announcement that her relationship with Kirill Marty's increased by 10 points. To both their surprise, she asked Auntie not to doubt her, because she was his sister, and he must trust her. Fist clenched in rage, he asked if she was trying to make him feel pity for her just because they were family. Renee took it for granted. Of course, she should trust and help a family member. Auntie closed his eyes and replied coldly that he would believe her if she had ever shown she was trustworthy. He continued, saying that her family had already given her chances time and time again, hoping she would come to her senses someday. Meeting resistance again, Renee declared that, if that was the case, it would be difficult to do anything. Waving a finger, she urged them to listen to her and give her just 1 month to prove her innocence. Full of skepticism, Auntie asked her if she even knew what she needed to do to achieve it. Laughing openly at his disbelief, Renee defiantly asked if he wasn't afraid that she might be right. Finally, Auntie gave up and declared that if she succeeded, he would even be willing to risk his name, doing everything in his power. Having reached an agreement with her brother, the young woman turned to Kirill, naming him witness to her brother's declaration. Renee was forced to get distracted upon noticing a new notification with a proposal to accept a special new mission. It stated that, following the agreement with Auntie, she had to prove her innocence, in exchange for which he would grant her wish. The young woman still couldn't understand why her relationship with her older brother wouldn't improve even after proving her innocence. Auntie suddenly tensed up and looked for his sword, hearing Renee ask them to take care of something for a month. He surprisingly asked what taking care of something meant, stating that it would be wiser to prepare to lose. In the end, she shook his hand, thanking him for his concern with a slight smile. Fearing his negative reaction, the girl rushed out of the room, leaving Kirill with the feeling that something had changed. Auntie looked at his hand thoughtfully, realizing he didn't plan it, but couldn't avoid the handshake. As an expert swordsman, he knew how to recognize the hand of a mere mortal, but in hers, he felt absolutely nothing. Sensing no kindness or skill whatsoever, he was disconcerted that he almost drew his sword without thinking. The girl's sinister expression stayed on his mind, making him wonder what the heck that was. Meanwhile, Renee was also perplexed, thinking what she should do lacking information. Going down the stairs, she thought it would be a good idea to get some source of information in the mansion. To her misfortune, even the simple maids treated her as if she were air. In the end, her plan failed spectacularly when she was rejected and told not to bother. This led her to think deeply about how her character survived in that toxic environment. She was absorbed in her contemplations when an unexpected question about whether she was resentful pulled her out of her thoughts. Renee glared at the maid she bumped into and grabbed her arm, asking how to get to her room. Finally in her room, the young woman was shocked by the size and opulence of the place. She immediately thought that, despite the treatment from others, the room was quite nice. Walking towards the closet, she decided the first thing was to change her uncomfortable clothes for something more comfortable. To her astonishment, it was packed with luxurious garments, dazzling due to their shine. The girl was frankly in shock at such wastefulness and unreasonable expense on simple outfits. Renee suddenly realized that, with such wealth, the Duke could buy any piece of information. The girl thoughtfully reviewed her constellation abilities, realizing she could easily extract information. She stopped dead, sadly recalling an episode from her previous life, where a subordinate died from using his powers. Renee also supposed that now she could ruin someone like before, and perhaps be reborn again. Therefore, she concluded that she must act with caution and make sure the saint was actually alive. The lack of proof and clues complicated the situation, considering no one knew if she had fled or if she had been murdered. Renee developed a gradual plan, knowing she had to proceed little by little to escape that world. The young woman mentally addressed the constellation of the Water Maiden, asking if they could find the saint. Her conversations sparked the interest of the other constellations, generating new ideas in Renee's mind. Finally, she got up, understanding it was time to leave and that she wouldn't get any information there, not even with money. Sensing the worry of the water nymph, the girl sarcastically asked how she could be in danger with her abilities. The evil bloodlord suggested she go to the place of disappearance, but although it seemed like a good idea to her, she didn't know where it was. Finally, the girl left the room with a serene face, affirming that one must not give up. And everything here can be useful. Renee burst into her brother Auntie's office, demanding a report of everything that happened. Believing he should help, he rubbed his temple tiredly and agreed to give her the report, wishing to quickly get rid of his annoying sister. In return, he demanded that she have bodyguards at all times. At first she tried to refuse, but when Auntie insisted, she pointed to a man, saying only he should accompany her. She immediately noticed that the whole crowd would monitor and report everything, so it was better to send her assistant with her. In the end, the girl got her way and successfully arrived at the place where the saint disappeared. It turned out to be the outskirts of the Marseilles Duchy, in the slums where she provided healing aid. Renee had to stop and pay attention to the man calling her from a distance. It turned out to be Father Nelson, looking suspiciously at the girl surrounded by his subordinates. Renee instantly guessed he accepted bribes, given his extravagant appearance, but she still noticed his book. She stated directly that she came to find the real criminal and offered her cooperation. Upon hearing her question about whether he didn't consider himself a murderer, he immediately replied that he didn't kill the saint. Nelson tensed up when she hit him with the fact that they had no evidence, without which they would hardly move forward. Renee smiled ostentatiously kindly, saying she wanted to cooperate for the common good. Hiding her true intentions, realizing that the others were beginning to trust her, the man asked how they could believe in the young woman's innocence. The girl clearly sensed why she was vulnerable, and therefore mentioned the donations with which she came to them. Nelson's face lit up with happiness upon seeing her treasures, which lay in the chest. He had to quickly hide his happiness upon feeling the weight of judgment from other clerics. After apologizing for not seeing her true feelings, the man asked how he could help her. Upon hearing about Lioncaris's belongings, he immediately offered her the saint's prayer book. Knowing she bribed the priest, she stated directly that she wanted to inspect Lady Caris's shop. Upon slightly opening the shop curtain, she was surprised by the cleanliness and modesty of the interior. The escort was amazed by her donation, but she downplayed it by saying she now had a prayer book. He justified his astonishment, saying that he previously thought she hated the church. Well, something similar happened with the archbishop. Renee was perplexed by what was said, not understanding what exactly he was referring to. Noticing her change in mood, he assumed she didn't want to talk about the topic, to which she objected. She interrupted him before he finished recounting that he once sprayed her with champagne after Lady Carey's was announced as a saint. The girl glared at the man when he repeated his words about how unfair everything was. Then, the archbishop decreed that she had committed an unforgivable act. Finally understanding the situation, she answered her escort's doubt with, "Think what you want." Annoyed, he declared that everyone was like that now, free to think and do as they pleased. Without listening to the slandered, the escort nodded calmly when she ordered him to leave and wait while she inspected everything. Renee continued pondering that, in her countless reincarnations, she had experienced more than once. All those individuals only wanted to hear the imposed truth, not the actual facts, so she couldn't trust anyone. She came to the conclusion that, since she had arrived in this world, this body now belonged to her. No matter how many suspicions and false accusations fell upon her, she would continue to believe in Renee. The young woman decided that if her character was considered evil, then evil she would be. She felt genuine support for the heroine whose body she now occupied. Feeling genuine faith in her innocence, she completed the extra mission: find someone who believed in her. Meanwhile, rumors were already spreading among the other employees about the visit of the Marquis Duke's daughter. Nelson summarized what happened, saying she had come to investigate and prove her innocence. While his interlocutor reviewed the documents, Nelson couldn't stop being amazed that the crown prince sent that man. It was Sidan Ansarad, the man nicknamed the King of Mercenaries at age 20. The priest was sure that someone like him was perfectly capable of solving such a case. Sidan immediately knew they had bribed him, but still, the most surprising thing was that Renee would travel all that way. He thoughtfully brought the document closer to his eyes, assuming she was quite impatient. The master swordsman instantly recalled several times she cut his hair and stole medicine from the crown prince to help him, and she didn't hesitate to trip the saint to make her fall either. Sidian begged him not to share information with the suspect and to hide the witnesses. As soon as he realized that the crown prince himself had ordered it, the priest had to attend to the story. To the guild master's surprise, the man collapsed onto the table, as if he had lost consciousness. Sensing something was wrong, he drew his sword, unaware he would face one of Renee's constellations. He assumed it was a sleeping drug, but dismissed it, as he fainted without any apparent reason. As soon as he thought he felt no magic whatsoever, a demonic creature stealthily approached him. To his astonishment, the man stood firm and brandished his sword, repelling the undesirable. As if trying to dispel the confusion, he felt the presence of dream demon energy. The man felt a strength comparable to a high-ranking demon, against which he could barely resist. He couldn't believe someone would summon an entity of such caliber in front of so many priests. Sidai noted with disgust that this man was definitely stronger than the crown prince. A war orphan, in an uncertain and unstable world, he clung to only one thing. That quality was strength, in which Sidain believed as others believe in kindness. Even if he became king and gained power and wealth, he would never stop seeking strength. The only thing that would quench his thirst was the prince's power, the strongest man in the world. But no matter how much admiration and thirst he felt, an unrelenting emptiness grew inside him. Finally, recovering from the last incident, he cautiously left the shop. Walking among the sleeping bodies, he understood that a single demon wouldn't be enough. The saint's shop appeared before him, from which the most powerful energy emanated. As soon as Sidan approached, he felt a scorching gaze fixed on his back. The man looked around fearfully, astonished by a power never felt before. Everything around him was like a natural disaster, something beyond human comprehension. He smiled hysterically, feeling himself lose control before someone invulnerable. He felt the compelling need to know who she was, believing that power was the only satisfaction. Sidain burned with a maniacal desire to be stronger, so he boldly opened the shop curtain. Bursting in bravely, he ordered the present person to finally show themselves. He couldn't advance further when he collapsed exhausted at Renee's feet, while his assistants celebrated behind his back. The girl leaned over the man with concern, rhetorically asking what had happened to this kid. Not long before, she was sitting indolently in an armchair, resolving a system error that sealed half of her powers. Determined to make do with what she had, she asked her water sister to look for the saint for an object. She felt the discontent of the Lord of Temptation and smiled, nodding to his request. Renee leaned back comfortably in her chair, ordering the priests to be invited for tea time. After all, her operation culminated with Sidon sleeping peacefully in the room adjacent to Renee's. Noticing he was still sleeping soundly, the young woman stealthily approached his bed. She observed his face carefully, surprising herself by thinking he was very handsome, and reminded her of her black cat. Renee, shamelessly, opened his eyelids, reflecting that there was something special and attractive in his eyes. She looked away tiredly, feeling the words of the evil blood lord that she was a true admirer of beauty. The Lord of Temptation added that he took her tastes into account when summoning demons, implying that she loved handsome men. Not wanting to hear more, the young woman blocked his ability to speak, which enraged him greatly. The girl analyzed his statistics and concluded that he was quite strong. She looked thoughtfully at the floor, reaffirming that, in this world, power is everything. Upon hearing the Lust Lord's suggestion to kill him right there, she paused briefly. Finally, she smiled, suggesting letting him live as she found him interesting. The reason for her decision was that he was the first one who didn't have a negative attitude towards Renee. Somehow, she concluded that this man was not only handsome and sweet, but also obedient. Coldly analyzing all his characteristics, the girl firmly decided to make such a skilled man her own. Sensing the surprise of the constellations, she said she wanted to subdue him, as he was the perfect companion. The evil blood lord felt indignation at her decision, but was ignored by his owner. Reviewing the reports from the dream demons, sent by the Lord of Lust, she stopped at the witness information. Renee instantly knew they were trying to hide the whole truth from her, concealing the existence of a witness. Angrily, she poked the sleeping man's nose with her finger, astonished that this was an order from him. And the crown prince, the girl froze, realizing that, in a fit of emotion, she had accidentally broken his nose. Unable to bear the torrent of emotional comments from her constellations, Renee abruptly cut them off. She calmed them down, saying that although she was going to correct her mistake, she was still going to scold each of them. After healing the man, Renee looked at him enthusiastically one last time, promising they would see each other again. Meanwhile, the man's sweet sleep continued, sending him varied visions. He couldn't understand what an unknown voice was trying to convey, telling him to wake up. To receive his punishment, Siden was still trying to decipher what punishment they were referring to, when they threatened him again with punishment if he didn't wake up while he was sleeping. His nose was pleasantly tickled by Renee's constellation, which was helping with the man's healing. He finally wakes up, but doesn't understand why his nose hurts so much. He jumps up suddenly. He needs to know what happened to his energy. He has to look at Renee after her obvious question. "Are you awake already?" The girl looks at him coldly when he, almost as if convincing himself, says her name. Smiling, she asks him directly if they have met before, since she knows him. He realizes that she is different from what he heard, and replies that she isn't. Still, the man closes his eyes tightly, as if something is disturbing him. Seeing that she is still there, close to his face, he asks her to move away. She decides to tame him instantly and places her hand on his, asking if he remembers her spirit. As if burned, he stutters instantly that he feels the true spirit of Marseilles. Comfortably settled in the chair, Renee confirmed his words, saying that he came for her. Upon hearing her question about whether she summoned the demon, she called him foolish and asked if he followed the order. Renee directly asked him why he didn't tell her about the witness who was present. The man looked away embarrassed, trying to make her believe he didn't know what she was talking about. She moved threateningly close again and ordered him not to waste time, as she knew the witness and knows everything. Indignant at the situation, the girl grabbed Siden by the face, forcing him to look directly into her eyes. She stated directly her concern that they tried to hide everything and pretend they knew nothing. Renee knew the saint had left on her own, proving there was no reason to detain her. The man stammered confusedly that the crown prince decided it, believing the saint disappeared because of her. The girl froze, astonished at his obedience, as if he were afraid of her. Renee admitted her assumption was logical, but tried to assure him it wasn't true. Still recovering from that sudden closeness, the knight turned, saying the crown prince thought differently. He supposed that, in this situation, he had either lost confidence after his fiancée's disappearance, or he was worried about his reputation. The young woman looked thoughtfully at Siden, while he summarized that all this was very different from the rumors. Upon hearing him say that he hated the crown prince more than he loved him, Renee stated directly that she couldn't stand him. For some reason, that sentence made him reflect, so he remained silent for a while. Finally, he decided to honestly confess that his engagement was nothing more than a business agreement. Since it was necessary, Renee impulsively grasped the edge of the bed, affirming that she knew about their lack of mutual feelings. However, she was surprised that he decided to share it with her, as if forgetting she was the suspect. Renee concluded it was a necessary engagement, and the fiancé wanted to eliminate any circumstance that could incriminate him. A shiver ran down her spine when he confessed that he had something stuck, and she decided to get rid of it. Ignoring the intense emotions, the girl jumped up and said that, now that she knew everything, she had to leave. He tried to stop her, asking if she was a demon, but Renee simply defined herself as human. Sidine directly asked how she achieved that physical state being a mere human. The man couldn't believe such power in a human, as if she held a deep grudge. Calling her mortal my lady, he reverently asked how she obtained that incredible strength. He looked at her surprised when she replied that for that she would have to die 58 times. Knowing that he had never wielded a sword, he thought her attempt to save the world was a joke. Sidon said that with that strength, he could unite the continent, but Renee replied that she wasn't interested. Deep down, she only wanted to go home, and she was disconcerted when he said he followed the path of the sword. Almost embarrassed, the man shyly declared that he would serve her as his teacher. Both were frozen in space, awaiting her response to the declaration. Renee herself was completely taken aback. She clearly did not expect that reaction. Even more, she was surprised by the expression of loyalty on Sayatsin's face, who did not take his eyes off her. Sayatsin Ansarad was an ambivalent figure, being the light of the empire through countless achievements. Being a commoner of unknown origin, he received as much hatred as admiration, as he only followed the path of the sword. Even in his relationships with the crown prince, he was always driven by the desire to expand his limits. At one point, boredom overwhelmed him when he lost his goal and felt a lack of interest in everything around him. In this way, one day he found a light that illuminated his forgotten yearning for self-improvement. That light was called Renee Marsays, who bound him to her to the deepest extent with her unlimited power. The girl noticed the notification that their relationship had improved by 200 units, just as he asked her to train him again. Seeing the notification with options to accept or refuse him as an apprentice, Renee scratched her head thoughtfully, weighing the pros and cons. She remembered very well that she had never done anything like this, because no matter how much time it took, the result would be the same. Although living alone was difficult for her, it was much better than taking responsibility for others. The man kept looking at the girl expectantly, burning inside with nervousness and fear. Without hesitating much, she finally made the decision to reject him, as she did not want to complicate her life so much. This greatly annoyed her interlocutor, so he involuntarily immediately assumed that she did not like him. Renee rejected his idea, affirming that although she liked him, she had her own path, and tutoring was not in her plans. She didn't get to explain the reason when she waved her hand to say goodbye to him, but she was stopped. Using all her charm, the man looked sadly into her eyes, as if begging her to listen to him. The girl was surprised to see the astonishing resemblance of his face to the sweet little faces of the pets from her old world. Feeling the additional pressure from the Queen of the Waves, she finally agreed to listen to him. Sidine honestly confessed that he had difficulties, since even after arduous training and encounters with the crown prince, he felt nothing. She severely asked him what he felt. When he said that this state had been interrupted by the encounter with her, the man fell silent. Timidly, he continued staring at her, as if he couldn't utter a word. Renee was completely perplexed by his reaction and flatly refused to believe his sudden assumption. She moved away from him as if she had been burned. When he, again with puppy-like enthusiasm, begged her to teach him, he proudly stated that it was a compliment, as he had never so much desired to compete with anyone before. Renee immediately felt internal irritation towards the constellation, which advised her to listen to him. Upon hearing his gratitude for this, he declared that he wasn't asking her to accept him. With his hand on his chest, the man swore that, as her pupil, he would support her morally and financially, fulfilling all her wishes. After hearing this, she concluded that he would be a valuable source of information in the future, given his resources and power. Finally, the young woman agreed to be his teacher, after weighing the pros and cons of the situation. Siden radiated joy upon hearing the yes from the one whom he had deeply admired for some time. He sincerely thanked her for becoming his teacher, which flooded her with discomfort and new responsibilities. Renee ordered him to call her lady, as before, and then announced she wanted to ask him something. The young woman was surprised at how docile he was, considering how quickly he had accepted her demand. She mentioned the crown prince and the saint again, asking him to tell her what he knew. But she hesitated, knowing that he obeyed her. Smiling, Siden replied that he didn't intend to hide anything from his teacher, which caused her even more discomfort. He warned that, before telling her anything, he begged her not to start an enmity with the crown prince. His words visibly cheered up the girl, as it instantly reminded her of a Cerberus worried about its mistress. Upon hearing her demand that he not worry and simply tell her, he shyly adjusted his messy hair. So, he related that the saint had received Belua's grace and was considered the incarnation of a god, in addition to being loved by everyone in the empire. Thanks to this, the crown prince secured great support from the empire's people following his engagement to the saint. Every effort was made to maintain the engagement, and he wouldn't care about bloodshed to extinguish the slightest spark. Despite such caution, it was precisely under these circumstances that the saint's disappearance occurred. And with a witness, after listening to the boy, Renee declared that, no matter how much she thought about this story of the witness, one idea would not leave her. She mentioned the last witness, the young priest who served the saint, who seemed to be struggling against something. That night, she spoke in her sleep and screamed that she must flee because of the danger, even though the priest tried to calm her. As if in a delirium, she kept repeating that she was in danger if she didn't escape immediately. After this, the saint disappeared while the priest was sleeping, and then he reported it to the crown prince. The girl was concerned about two things, because she, as a saint, could not defend herself, and what danger threatened her. Siden replied that, if the fiancé fled right before the wedding talking about danger, everyone could focus on the groom. Renee looked at the man uneasily when he, saying that the crown prince was worried, also mentioned his rivals. He mentioned Princess Iden, with the support of the emperor and the nobility, who was the crown prince's only opponent. The girl's surprise did not escape her, but she simply couldn't tell him the real reason why she didn't know. He looked at Renee uneasily when she suddenly declared that all this was a bit awkward. She replied that she had to find the saint and prove she was alive, but it would be strange to return her where she was in danger. Siden looked at his teacher in fright when she unexpectedly coughed because her throat had become dry. Covering his eyes, Renee demanded that he not look at her like that, as she was not as good as she seemed. He immediately stammered that he didn't know how the rumors could be so false and wished to mend their situation. She retorted that she was there to prove his innocence and now understood that the problem was the crown prince. Siden blushed when saying he didn't fully understand how she was going to solve it, but still begged her to teach him. Trying to maintain composure, she replied that it wasn't difficult, as she was just going to meet. In converse, upon hearing his objection that the crown prince would hesitate to listen to her, she pinched his nose and said she preferred physical contact to words. Obviously, he misinterpreted her words, thinking she was going to use physical force in a fight. The girl corrected him, saying that, thinking about it, it was a threat but not a death threat. She nodded at his assertion that he wouldn't listen to her. But if they barged into the imperial family, everything would get complicated. Knowing that she urgently needed to meet her accuser, she asked Siden how to reach that recluse. Expelling fire from his palm ostentatiously, he replied with a menacing smile that they should burn down his house. Preparing to leave, the man asked her why she had decided to take him to the duke's mansion. Feeling uncomfortable by his question, she knew she couldn't honestly reply that she was doing it for the mission. No beating around the bush. He declared that he did it to become her friend. After this, he inquired if they were getting closer. Seed added that he didn't want his learning to overwhelm her, as he simply learned by being by her side. Closing her eyes tiredly, Renee coldly replied that if he thought she was overwhelmed, it was his impression. He became visibly saddened when she said that it was much easier for her to understand the situation that way. Having him near, the man suddenly blurted out that she would be better off if he wasn't around. He replied sadly that she was the famous daughter of the empire's only duke, and he an insignificant commoner. Renee asked him what all that meant, just as he said that she had already done a lot for him by bringing him along. He only timidly replied that the fact that she took him to the temple demonstrated her desire to be friends. The guy said again that nobles despise commoners, and that could ruin everything. Sayedin was sure. They just wanted to brand him as a commoner. That's why he avoided the aristocracy. Renee thought that actually, they only feared her growing power. Perhaps they felt threatened. That aspect did not surprise her. Not at all. Many feared and respected her, but desired her downfall. The girl understood. That role belonged to him, not her. But still, he worried about her. Shortly before leaving, they saw her with the mercenary king. That undoubtedly boosted her reputation. The peace on the boy's face, tired after a long day, pulled Renee out of her musings. She had to ask. She wanted to know, casually, if they really called him king of the empire. How embarrassing. Renee wanted to advise him not to get bitter about the mockery. Not even she, being a noble, commanded that respect. The man froze. Uncomfortable, he felt her accusing finger on his nose, as if she were scolding him. The girl, with fire in her eyes, ordered him not to flee from his aggressors and to stand firm. Even if he was exhausted, she forcefully insisted that she didn't care what others thought, to defend his position without doubting for a second. Renee also declared that he should trust his own worth and act decisively, without caring what bothered others. After listening to her to the end, he felt visibly disturbed by so much attention, but he noticed how apathy, finally, faded away. Getting straight to the point, she informed him that from now on, he was her guest, so it would be strange if he didn't feel at home. Unfortunately for the young woman, upon arriving at the palace, she immediately ran into her brothers, furious about her decision. She immediately tried to calm things down, begging them not to start arguing without reason, since that boy had helped her. As if not hearing her, Auntie shouted at the girl, reproaching her for arriving in the middle of the night and bringing a man with her. Renee did not give up, and holding her head high, approached her brother, asking him if he had gone deaf, since he wasn't listening to her. Before he could criticize her for her rude tone, she instantly replied that he was squealing like a hatchling. Auntie was beside himself. How dare he compare him to a mere hatchling? Upon hearing her call him madam, he decided to reprimand everyone, starting with the maids who ignored her. But they weren't the only victims of Renee's fury. She also scolded her brothers, incapable of controlling her. Pointing her finger at them, she demanded that they treat her like a person, not just a mere lady. Auntie, defiantly, snapped back that no matter how hard she tried to be tough, she would always be a lady. And he also attacked Sayatsin. He said that, no matter how much of a prince's investigator and sword master he was just a commoner. Renee firmly grabbed her guest's hand when her older brother told her she should know her place and go to her room. He didn't expect that reaction. She defended him tooth and nail, shouting that Sayatsin was one of the two sword masters of the empire. Renee reproached them that they should have attended to such an important guest from the start, instead of showing their ineptitude. Meanwhile, Kirill and Auntie were in complete shock, realizing that the most troublesome person in the family had scolded them. He repeated that, even if he denied his guilt, he had no right to bring a stranger. She vociferously stated that it was none of his business and that he should shut up, as Seed could prove her innocence. Auntie was shocked by such fierce defense of her boundaries, which provoked Kirill's mockery. Renee glared at him, mentally gloating because that response got the better of him. Finally asking if that was all he wanted to say, she made a gesture and took Seed away. Upon hearing Auntie's shout that he wasn't finished, she simply coldly replied that she didn't care. Stopping on the balcony, she added that she was busy with a guest and should stop bothering her, and read the newspaper tomorrow. Auntie, furious, tried to shout at her, as he didn't understand anything and didn't know which newspaper that was. Kirill, smiling, declared that he considered it a failure, as he had never seen her so sure. Upon hearing his question about whether she truly believed him, he replied that the mercenary king himself had recognized her, which already says something. Auntie fell silent when he cleverly suggested that, if she turned out to be innocent, it would be beneficial for their family. Internally, he agreed with his brother, as if she were right, they would lose their only suspect. The next morning, the young woman awoke with difficulty, feeling the intense light of the sun's rays. Renee was surprised by how warm they were, as she hadn't felt them in the monster tower for a long time. She slowly got out of bed, thinking Sidon might already be awake, so she should go help him. The memory of their last conversation, where she motivated him, immediately came to mind, and he listened attentively. Perceiving a certain change in her room, she was internally surprised that this was the first time she hadn't noticed someone entering. Due to the dangerous environment in the tower, she developed a passive ability of heightened senses to survive. To her surprise, upon arriving in this world, the ability deactivated, so Mara informed her that Sidon had come. The reason for deactivating the ability was simply that here there is no one who dares to touch her, even with the petal of a rose. She tiredly touched the back of her neck and ordered them to enter upon hearing an exaggeratedly loud knock on the door. A troop of maids burst into her room, looking at her with contempt, as if they hated her with all their soul. Calmly settling onto the sofa, Renee asked the reason for their visit, to which they replied that she was requested downstairs. She didn't get to ask the reason before they started exchanging knowing glances, as if plotting something. In an instant, they fixed their mocking gazes on her, wishing to completely humiliate the young woman. Laughing openly, they declared that in the Empire, there weren't many who sought her out to reprimand her. Besides the master, Renee looked thoughtfully at the brazen ones and felt that something wasn't right. She observed them as if they were a pair of annoying ants, meditating on how to deal with them. The maids openly began to humiliate Renee Marsize, saying she was a disgrace who only knew how to pretend. Aware that these mockeries were not new, the girl initiated her revenge by warning them not to count on their numerical superiority. Meditating on how to approach or bribe them, she concluded that the most important thing for them was power. One of them haughtily asked what she would do if power resided only in the young masters, not in a lady. Filling the space with her painful and oppressive aura, Renee approached the insolent one and sentenced that they knew nothing. The maid coughed immediately, feeling how she gradually lost the ability to breathe. She fell to the floor, terrified, understanding that in front of her was a monster, not someone to humiliate. Seeing Renee approach quickly, she looked her in the eyes pleadingly, as if asking for mercy. Unfortunately for her, the young woman used Astaroth's breathing ability, plunging her into a state of sleep. The other maids crawled to their friend, believing she had died, and started begging Renee for forgiveness. The girl understood that the day before she had been so free with Seed, because both knew contempt. Crossing her arms tiredly, she addressed the maids, asking why they were so stupid. Understanding that in the end it was she who used force, she tried to convince herself that everything was fine. Renee, as if nothing had happened, checked the system data, while the other maids continued crying terrified on the floor. One of them looked at the girl in surprise when she finally asked where she should go. She just smiled mischievously, headed towards the door, and ordered her to take care of the rest in that room. As soon as she left, she almost collided with the boy who was in front of her, with whom she had spoken not long ago. With a smile, she concluded that the thief cat had finally come to her, referring to Syatsian. He only looked at the floor, ashamed, explaining his appearance, because he had felt a terrifying energy. The girl asked smilingly how he had felt her, thinking internally that she and Kirill were very different. She looked at the man in surprise, clearly not expecting him to ask how she felt. Renee immediately bombarded her with questions about why she should be unwell, and if he also came to accuse her. He only looked at the girl sadly and asked her if she had ever treated her beloved lady like that. Realizing she had spoken too much, she replied with a slight smile that everything was fine, and that she had overreacted. Getting straight to the point, she suggested going to see Auntie, who had invited her to a meeting that morning. As soon as she reached his side, he immediately stabbed the newspaper with a knife, piercing it. He furiously looked at his sister, demanding she explain her behavior. The newspaper contained information from the witness of the saint's disappearance, and that Renee Martinez had raised suspicions against the crown prince. Starting to eat breakfast, she irritably asked him what exactly he needed her to explain. Before that, he froze over the table, pointing at that shocking article where she almost accused the crown prince himself. Before he could shout at the girl again, Syatsian immediately came to her defense. Ordering the duke to calm down, he just tiredly smacked his forehead, asking if she knew the threat this could pose to their family. As if mocking him, he snapped that he should eat something to quell his hunger and stop being so emotional. He coldly replied that he would prove her innocence, and even if the priest's name was made up, his testimony was true. Auntie asked Sidon if he could believe this information, receiving an ambiguous answer as the only reply. The man found it strange, because looking at Sidon, it seemed to him that he didn't feel much like dealing with the case. He only coldly replied that he was investigating to do his job and discover the truth. Nothing more. Auntie directly asked him if considering evidence against the main suspect was what he called investigating. Without backing down, Seaton inquired if it bothered him that a commoner was helping his sister, or that she was being exonerated. The young woman kept observing their confrontation, without ceasing to be amazed at how good Seaton was at his job. She looked surprised at the guest when, upon asking him if he was Renee's friend, he replied that it was completely false. The man, with respect and deference, assured her that he was putting all his effort into solving it. Renee gave him a supportive pat on the shoulder. Thinking that sometimes he said very embarrassing things, she instantly turned towards her brother, declaring that now it was his turn. Threateningly pointing the knife at Auntie, she demanded that he apologize for being rude to her guest. The young woman mentioned their last nighttime argument, in which she was forced to defend Sayatsin's honor. The man awkwardly scratched the back of his neck, feeling his face redden for having taken his side. Understanding that in a way he was right, Auntie lowered his head and wearily apologized for what happened yesterday. He simply interrupted him, saying that he shouldn't apologize because he should apologize to someone else. Catching his idea enthusiastically, Renee belligerently declared that he should also apologize to her. It was obvious that Auntie did not feel guilty, so she immediately specified that he had disrespected her and had brazenly gotten angry. He tried to stop her, saying that she had also been rude and damaged the family's reputation. But she replied that she had found a witness and improved the reputation. Wielding the knife, Auntie said that this evidence was insufficient and that if she provided more, he would apologize. Although internally admitting he had some reason, the girl couldn't help how much he exasperated her. Insisting that the matter was settled, Renee wiped her mouth and announced that they needed to prepare for a special guest. After learning about the Queen of the Waves and that the guest's healing was near, she said someone would arrive soon. Upon hearing her brother ask if she had invited anyone, she simply replied that he himself had decided to come. Before that, he tensed up, not understanding what she meant by talking about such a particular guest. Seaton and Renee jumped up when the butler ran to him with urgent news. Not even a minute had passed when Auntie, furious, threw a chair, unable to contain his rage. He furiously opened the heavy door and looked at the girl, asking her what the hell she had done. Calling him impulsive, she indifferently turned to Seaton and told him that this guest was familiar to her. Meanwhile, everyone slowly headed towards the immense avenue of the Marquis's mansion garden. Spotting Auntie in the distance with a special guest, the young woman calmly approached them. Happy for the long-awaited meeting, Renee smiled timidly, without looking away for an instant. This guest was none other than the Crown Prince of the Ramdish Empire, loved by the real Renee. The girl firmly greeted His Highness the Crown Prince, showing her joy for this chance encounter. Renee knew, from the first moment, that the system would connect them in the most uncomfortable way possible. She was astonished to see that, as soon as he saw her, his attitude towards her suddenly worsened by 10 points. 10, is it? The girl thought to herself that, if it bothered him so much, she wished he would kick her out already, and stop treating her so badly. Auntie tactfully interrupted the man, asking what had brought him suddenly to them. Ignoring the man's question, he brazenly touched the young woman's lips, saying that she wasn't even trying to hide her change. Leaning in dangerously, he stared fixedly into her eyes, asking her who the hell she was. Zayden was completely shocked by the actions of the one he admired so much, and emulated. As if forgetting who she was, Renee boldly pushed his hand away, telling him she hadn't given him permission to touch her. She directly advised them not to provoke each other, and, if he had something to say, that he should speak and leave there. The girl didn't want to restrain herself, as she knew that, even if he was the strongest in the empire, he could never compare to her. The man kept looking at his palm with bewilderment, as if he couldn't believe he had been put in his place. Clenching his fist, his face changed instantly and he glared at her, saying that now none of that mattered. Threatening, he confidently asserted that she was the one guilty of the disappearance. Renee understood that he was trying to intimidate her with his aura, as a normal person would not have endured it. Meanwhile, Auntie was just as perplexed, remembering how on the first day she begged him to trust and help a member of his family. To the girl's surprise, her brother's back suddenly appeared, protecting her. The man defended his sister, saying that one could not pressure a girl who had never wielded a sword like that. Renee instantly understood that he was trying to protect her, even though he himself was trembling. She could barely utter a word when she felt the brush of a light hand on her shoulder. Seeing that gesture, the Crown Prince immediately reached for his sword, preparing for an attack. Demanding to know where Leanne was, the Crown Prince lunged, claiming his power had clarified everything. Renee remained unflustered in front of the man, showing absolutely no emotion of fear or reverence. Hearing him ask how he could believe it, she counterattacked by asking him what he had done to the saint. The girl openly ridiculed how quickly and easily he had drawn his sword, as if he were afraid of a mere girl. Sidon masterfully deflected the crown prince's attack, aimed directly at the girl who had exasperated him. He tried to order him to step aside, but the guy refused and kept defending his master. Sidon glared at his former idol, asserting that Lady Marcy was not guilty. He tried to reason with him, telling him that no one in the Empire hated Lady Lion like she did. The other one just tried to calm him down, assuring him that, if she wanted to, she would have chosen a more effective method. The crown prince fell back, visibly annoyed, when the man declared they must unite if he wanted to find the saint. Renee just kept watching the spectacle with boredom, knowing that, if they didn't stop him, she would hit him without hesitation. Returning to the subject of his accusation, he revealed that he was the one who hid the witness, and then accused her, locking her up. Both men looked down thoughtfully, convinced that all their past actions were driven by emotion. Pointing towards the gazebo, she suggested they go to a more comfortable place, as the talk promised to be long. In the very next instant, everyone obediently followed in the direction the young woman had indicated. Before that, he forced her to stop, grabbing her arm and quietly asking about the power mentioned by the crown prince. Seeing that the others were also stopping, Renee ordered them to move on. Ignoring his hesitation, she analyzed her brother's features and understood that, although he protected her, with that attitude he wouldn't believe her words. Hearing her say he shouldn't know, he insisted on his right to know what concerned his sister. Although he asked when they had become so close, he took her hand in his, wanting to show his power. Mentally, she apologized and decided to show only a small part, plunging him into a deep sleep. Not even a minute passed when he fell heavily onto Renee, sinking into a truly deep sleep. The crown prince and Sidon watched all this, visibly surprised by what they were witnessing. The young woman immediately dismissed those questions, returning to the reason they had gathered there, insisting that that was also important. The man asked her what kind of power that was, and if she had sold her soul to the devil for it. As if mocking him, Renee nodded at his assumption and added that she had reincarnated 58 times. Her mocking answer enraged the crown prince, who reprimanded her and demanded she behave more seriously. He immediately began bombarding her with questions about how many types of magic she used, and if she was good with a sword. Renee immediately stopped his torrent of words, reminding him that she was not obliged to explain her abilities. Hearing his reminder that she had not become his subordinate for a common goal, he promised not to ask about it anymore. The crown prince still couldn't understand why she hid them, as this way he could inherit the dukedom and obtain a title. The young woman thought deeply, taking his words to mean that all this time they had humiliated her for being weak. She immediately recalled the words of the constellation of the Lord of Temptation, declaring that this world is obsessed with the law of the jungle. Originally, this continent was ruled by monsters, which were demonic beasts that reproduced quickly. Despite their numerical and strength advantage, humans were smarter and managed to defend themselves. They mercilessly exterminated monsters and thus raised their kingdom. Thus a new era of rebirth, progress, and wealth was born, the recipe for new wars. In the end, they tore each other apart, fighting for every damned resource and territory. And thus the Ramdish Empire grew, following the law of the strongest in its thirst for power and domination. That was the law in their empire, sickening rivalry that forced families to go crazy for power. But the strangest thing, the crown prince was interested in the face, not the fiancé, and the lady was called a disgrace for being weak. Returning to harsh reality, Renee nodded. She knew she could found a new lineage. Despite everything, she was honest. What His Highness, the Crown Prince, proposed did not interest her in the slightest. She declared that founding a new lineage would only bring her trouble, just like becoming the new heir. In her mind it was clear that fleeting joy of power would vanish in the blink, and close of an eye. She knew, better than anyone, that all this was a macabre game with devastating consequences. In summary, she concluded that, simply put, she neither needed nor was interested in any of this. Pushing Auntie with one finger, she declared that she didn't care what those who judge by strength thought. Renea looked coldly at her peacefully sleeping brother, ready to share her new conclusion. Addressing the crown prince, she called him disgusting, as everyone only took her seriously because of her power. He tried to deny it, saying that if she thought so, she understood nothing about the world. How naive. Renee smiled mockingly and noticed regret in his words, asking him what would have happened if she had told everything. He became enraged upon hearing her ask if, in that case, he would have been engaged to her instead of the saint. The crown prince stood up suddenly and slammed his hands on the table. He no longer wanted to hear the truth. Looking for someone to support him, the man turned to Seed, but was completely ignored. Renee looked haughtily at the crown prince and told him not to blame her, as she had not sworn allegiance to him. She added that proving her innocence mattered more to her than caring what kind of relationship he would have with the saint. The young woman remembered that her true goal was, finally, to return to her world and see her beloved pet. Finally, she ordered them to focus on the case, instead of arguing about whether she was strong or not. Renee demanded that they declare her innocence before agreeing to withdraw the accusatory article. She perfectly understood that the best way to get rid of the accusations was to gain the support of someone more influential. He suspiciously asked her if she was really innocent, but she replied that she would like to ask him the same question. The man, exhausted, held his head, saying he had no reason to kill Lion, since she was his fiancée and future empress. Renee vehemently declared that was the reason the saint wanted to get away from him. She understood why he was accusing her, but she was clear that she would not tolerate it if he was the culprit. The publication of the article was a counterattack to divert attention to a new suspect. Now she was going to examine everything with a magnifying glass to know if he was truly innocent and what his true face was. Obviously, he dismissed her words as madness, after which she smiled and said it could be true. Renee shared a possible scenario where he couldn't hold back the saint who wanted to escape. Everything the crown prince could gain from marrying the saint disappeared, and he decided to get rid of her, taking revenge. The crown prince became enraged by her brief account and tried to prove that she never thought of running away from him. Realizing she had regained the advantage in the conversation, she asked him if he could prove his innocence. Like her, the man trembled with rage and struck the table so hard that he cracked it, trying again to intimidate her with his aura. He said that if anyone in this world was innocent, it was him. Throughout this time, Renee analyzed his behavior and came to the conclusion that if he were guilty, his aura wouldn't change like that. The girl mentally consulted her constellations on whether or not to believe him and got an ambiguous answer. Understanding that this way they would get nowhere, she proposed considering it a temporary truce agreement. He dismissed it, saying it was not in his power, when she offered to withdraw the article in exchange for dropping the charges. Renee looked at him with discontent, reminding him that he was the one investigating the saint's disappearance. Upon hearing again that he needed more compelling evidence, the girl rummaged in her pocket for her alibi. To his surprise, she handed him a white envelope, asking at the same time if that would be enough. Everyone was shocked when she declared that it contained the saint's current location. Thus, she became a suspect for the saint's disappearance in Marsa's territory. But while she was in the dungeon, the saint was seen somewhere else. With jubilation, Renee declared that, since she was still alive, she was no longer a criminal. While happily arguing her innocence, the crown prince took advantage of the commotion to take the sheet she had given him. The girl did not seem willing to reveal her source when he asked where she got it from. The man said thoughtfully that the charges would be dropped if they truly managed to find her. Renee nodded, understanding that first they had to make sure it was true. His face twitched with disgust when he suddenly declared that she would have to wait there. Trying to gain an advantage, he asserted that, no matter how much she suspected him, the main suspect there was her. To his misfortune, the sheet with the coordinates in his hand began to self-destruct instantly. The crown prince looked surprised at his hand, in which only pieces of paper remained, revealing Renee's character. She firmly declared that he was the main suspect in her eyes, and that she had obtained that information by herself. Knowing she had emerged victorious, she proposed they collaborate despite mutually suspecting each other. Looking at his hand with disgust, he decided to ask her how he could be sure that she wouldn't kill Leanne. Without giving a clear answer, Renee returned the same question to him. The girl approached and took his hand, chilling him with her breath and threatening that she could have killed him long ago, if she wanted to. The crown prince tensed when she added that he didn't know her abilities and, therefore, he couldn't be sure. As soon as he extended his hand as a sign of truce, he was rudely ignored. Without waiting for his answer, she declared that she would take it as an agreement and they would leave in 2 hours. She also threatened to tell the princess everything if he dared to disappear during that time. As soon as she was saying goodbye to her companions, Sayatsin stopped her, asking her to stay. The man began gently wiping her palm with a napkin, arguing that she had held His Highness's hand. The crown prince closely observed the movements and behavior of the boy who had just humiliated him. He decided to ask him directly, since when he had become Lady Marsai's lapdog. Once she left, with a glare, Satan demanded respect, unleashing the crown prince's fury. The man bluntly stated that he was very different from the lady, and comparing them would be an insult to her. Smiling, he repeated that the lady would not have reacted like that when the blonde said it was disrespectful. The crown prince suspected a hidden meaning, but he only replied that it was a simple impression. After a while, everyone was ready to embark on the journey to find the saint. Staying close to Renee, the crown prince asked if everything was all right. Leaving her stunned, she didn't understand the problem. When he clarified that she had left Marsai's territory, the girl reflected upon hearing him say that she never left her territory. Except for banquets, Renee dismissed it, saying one couldn't always live in their territory, surprising the boy. After telling him she knew nothing about her, she mentally returned to the fact that even she didn't know Renee. The girl couldn't stop being surprised by how complicated she was, and that she never wore anything but dresses. She felt uncomfortable changing the heroine's tastes, but she knew that lately she only wore dresses. The crown prince was visibly surprised by her new facet, not knowing that she had to wear suede clothes for it. He finally decided to cut her off, and, while they were together, tell her he didn't love her anymore. The man was stunned, never imagining that his devoted fan could say goodbye to him so quickly. Sizing him up, she asked him if he really thought she would always be chasing him. She honestly declared that, when all this is over, she will stop seeing him completely. Renee firmly decided to pretend she never loved him, which prompted his question about what she planned to do in the future. The crown prince shamelessly asked her if she wasn't going to adhere to someone else, like she did once with him. The girl only looked with disappointment at her unpleasant counterpart, asking what he meant. She gasped in disgust when he mentioned seeing Seed hovering around her yesterday. Renee, furious, ordered him to mind his own business when he implied that he was appealing to her pity. Finally, overcome by a new wave of anger, the girl sped away from the insolent one. Even Seed was surprised to see how quickly Renee shot off. He tried to stop her, and smiled upon seeing that he had finally caught her attention. Starting a casual chat, he commented that they should arrive in a couple of hours. She was visibly annoyed by the delay, caused by the crown prince dragging the nights along. Seed asked her what she meant when she said that the longer it went on, the less he understood her. The man smiled ironically upon hearing her ask, disappointed why she had ever liked him. Hearing her displeasure, he assured her that he would get rid of him if she ordered it. Renee joked that it was a conspiracy. She herself would have liquidated the crown prince if she wanted to. Sayatsin's gaze did not miss how restless the girl looked today. More than usual, not feeling like talking about it, she immediately said she was fine. And then she used a spell to erase all fatigue. Warning that she would go ahead, the girl shot off, leaving everyone behind in the blink of an eye. Renee thought that, although she tried to hide it, deep down she was actually very worried. The main reason was that the epic quest she needed to complete to escape had not yet appeared in that world. This fact tormented her, because no matter how much she complained about the system's failures, it didn't respond. After listening to the constellation's suggestions, she showed her disagreement, knowing that things would only get worse. The young woman agreed that now she must concentrate on proving her innocence, whatever it takes. Upon arriving, she gazed at the sky pensively, begging not to remain trapped here forever. How horrible. And so they ended up in a simple and ordinary place, where they last saw the saint. As soon as they advanced, a guard appeared in front of them, detaining the one who took the saint home. Renee looked at them with annoyance, aware that, without the prince's people, they would have found her easily. She was visibly disappointed, understanding that all this was a complete waste of time. The accused did not manage to present himself when the crown prince pointed his sword at him, demanding the truth. Crying from fear, the man stammered that the saint had indeed stayed with them, but that he didn't know until the announcement. When asked why Ileana had gone to his house, he replied that he only offered her to spend the night and stay one day. Renee calmly stepped between the prince and the man, demanding that they take them to his house. The man looked away, not understanding why she was asking for precisely that. Seeing his confusion, She didn't understand what was wrong, but insisted on the inspection. He understood that he wouldn't get rid of them, and frightened, pointed toward his house. To everyone's astonishment, his house was a true penthouse, impressive for its size and wealth. The three of them were in total shock. They never imagined that the building chosen by the saint would be so lavish. As soon as she entered his territory, Renee smelled a strange odor coming from the depths of the house. At first, she thought it came from Sidon, but dismissed the idea after carefully sniffing it. Realizing it smelled like lavender, she desperately tried to guess where that strange smell came from. The man was surprised to see her turn to one side, clearly determined to do something. Not even a minute passed when, suddenly, she lunged inside the house as if she had found a clue. Both the Crown Prince and Sidon immediately ran after her, sensing she would soon lead them to the truth. Renee frantically looked for the right door and wandered through long hallways, not wanting to stop. Finally, her gaze landed on that door. The possible key to her sudden investigation examined the entrance, revealing a disturbing detail that, undoubtedly, would shock everyone. Sidon saw her stop before the door and asked if she had found anything relevant. The Crown Prince tried to reprimand her for her audacity, but Renee interrupted him, stating that there was someone there. Upon entering, the men's faces twisted in genuine surprise at what they saw. Before them lay a real corpse, the source of the burnt smell and the stench. Renee looked straight ahead with seriousness, while the prince tried to compose himself, struggling against the stench and dizziness. They examined the body and noticed a family ring on it, belonging to the saint. The Crown Prince gave orders immediately, and the guard filled the house. Starting the investigation, Sidon and Renee watched from afar the crestfallen expression of the Crown Prince, affected by the loss. Suddenly, he noticed that the fire was still smoking, indicating it had only been burned 20 minutes ago. The girl frowned, deducing that they had been wandering the village while the corpse burned. Her mind instantly flooded with the idea that, if Prince Ishir hadn't brought the knights, she would have saved him alone. Renee's constellations tried to calm her, saying that this would complicate the mission. But she rejected it, stating that a life was not worth it. Upon hearing Sayatsin's question about whether this was the saint's corpse, she said she didn't know, but she felt divine power emanating. She knew that if a person possessed immense divine power, it remained even after death. The girl thought it was a horrible sight of a body burned alive and horribly disfigured. After a while, she rode forward, accompanied by her two companions and the guards. Although she understood that this was proof of her innocence, and that the saint had been alive until recently, Renee remembered Prince Ishir's somber tone, who only anguishedly pondered who and why he had murdered her. The ring was the only way to identify her, the same one the prince gave her. Made for her, it was special because it had a protective spell, impossible to break with normal force. That's why it survived. Inside the building, he saw it. The Crown Prince held the body of a girl with a completed mission notification. The Queen of Waves tried to comfort her, while she thought sadly that a life had been lost, and the mission was completed. She tried to overcome the sadness, as tragically, she had already experienced the pain of seeing people burn. The girl remembered the obsession of the tower owner, burning his captured companions high up. She had experienced it so many times that, unfortunately, she knew that smell very well. They turned when they heard the approaching argument between Ishir and the house owner. The man begged them to listen to him, swearing he had no idea how it happened. Sidon tried to calm him, reminding him that fortunately there was no proof of his involvement. Understanding he was right, the Crown Prince forcefully pushed the possible suspect. Both Renee and Sayadin immediately turned their gaze back to the man, consumed by his emotions. Trying to clear his throat, the owner said the saint had left without a word, so he didn't know the exact time. Seeing the situation stall, Renee asked Sayadin to step aside and ordered no one to enter. As she wanted to interrogate him, alone with Derek, she snapped her fingers and told him that now he would only speak the truth. Nothing but the truth. His mind was immediately caught and plunged into hypnosis, allowing Renee to completely direct his consciousness. The young woman knew that although this ability was useful, it always represented a risk if she didn't choose the right target. When ordering him to recall the moment he last saw the saint, he kept saying he only saw darkness. She was surprised when he stated that he didn't feel the holy power of the saint she was talking about. It shocked her even more when he said it wasn't holy power, but demonic, which immediately caused the master of temptation's rejection. The girl nodded mentally, knowing that a saint couldn't fall solely to a demon's hands. Under hypnosis, Renee understood that Derek was suffering from magical manipulation, a sign of the culprit's power. After analyzing it, she could only think, what is he trying to achieve to go to such extremes? The girl's face instantly twitched. The Queen of Waves revealed to her that the Crown Prince was hiding evidence. Not 2 minutes passed when she burst into Ishir's office, who was placidly cleaning his sword. At first, he didn't understand what Renee meant when she asked him if he had anything to tell her. She almost pounced on him, shouting that she had found and hidden the saint's suicide note. With an impassive face, he asked her if she had secret dealings with his knights, but she attributed it to her intuition. And Sheer didn't believe a word and brandished his sword, accusing her of conspiracy or espionage. He smiled smugly and brazenly looked at the girl, while bringing a sharp edge to her throat. The girl smiled maliciously and asked what was wrong, since he would have done the same in her place. The Crown Prince only replied sarcastically that he was not in her place. Then he hid his sword. Renee didn't immediately understand what he meant when he extended the note to her, saying he hadn't shown it to her for her safety. He just smiled predatorily and placed the note in her hands, saying he doubted she could remain calm after reading it. Hearing this, she just angrily withdrew her hand, feeling a clear rejection of his touch. The young woman began to read the note, which indicated that the saint's life was marred by a tragedy she could no longer bear. She wrote that this false commitment to a man who didn't love her tormented her, and also someone who was willing to kill her for her. However, no matter how much these facts tormented her, she still managed to forgive them both, and even love them. Despite this, she could by no means forgive herself for allowing herself to become involved in this situation. After finishing reading the note, Renee furiously clenched it in her fist, declaring that this was over. Completely stunned, she walked away from Ishir, declaring that they were now in the same boat. Not grasping her sadness, the man replied that he didn't understand her allegory about the sinking ship. Renee burned with fury, aware that if it was discovered, it would be the end of both of them, and of her successful mission. It was hard for her to imagine what would happen if she failed the main mission, the reward of which was what she needed so much. She knew she couldn't afford to lose, considering everything she had worked so hard to achieve. And Sheer did not share her fervor, and coldly replied that nothing would happen if she kept her mouth shut. Renee agreed with his statement that someone other than Lion could have orchestrated it. Given her naivety, the Crown Prince said he would make no statements until the corpse's identity was confirmed. Seeing that she didn't grasp the seriousness, he proposed a bet on whether rumors about the note would spread. He was surprised by her offer, whereupon she added that he was the one who didn't fully understand the situation. Pointing a finger at the man, Renee declared that someone was trying to frame them as accomplices. She was indignant at his intention to hide the note and simply say he trusted his people. Renee walked away from Ishir, asserting that it wouldn't be long before the entire empire knew the note's contents. At his denial of the situation, she smiled confidently, stating they would soon find out. The Crown Prince accepted the terms of the game, saying if he lost, she would do as he said, and vice versa. Not even a minute passed when a bunch of knights burst in, announcing that the news of the note was already spreading throughout the empire. Renee immediately faced multiple notifications of her reputation deteriorating, as she instantly became a suspect again. Upon returning home, she was surprised to see the system's new mission. She had to clear the suspicion on herself and Ishir. That day, she wanted to stay longer at the scene, but the Crown Prince insisted she return to her quarters. After everyone found out, the young woman was once again pierced by people's disdainful stares. In an attempt to release all her accumulated rage, Renee tore her pillow apart, scattering the stuffing everywhere. What infuriated her the most was that Sidon and Ishir, precisely them, had gone to the imperial palace to investigate. Renee lay back, trying to catch her breath, until she heard Kirill knocking on her room door. The boy was visibly surprised to see the reigning chaos in his deranged sister's room. Upon entering, he immediately saw an exhausted Renee, lying on the sofa amidst a pile of feathers. Hearing her complaints about her posture, the girl only replied that he should quickly say what he wanted. He finally revealed the reason for his visit, saying his father asked him to report on the withdrawal of the murder charges. Sitting in an armchair, he said he was going all in and that their family was summoned to the capital. Renee thought she liked this attitude, but Kirill advised her to prepare for what was to come. Kirill grabbed a pillow, wanting to imitate Renee, and said he was angry even if he didn't look it. The girl unintentionally compared him to Auntie, furiously yelling at him for his ease in getting into trouble. Kirill stunned her by stating that he only loved Lion, and that affected his behavior. Seeing her astonishment, the boy let slip that she should know he suffered 10 years of unrequited love. Renee paused to think, as she believed he suffered for love of his heroine, not Lion. With this information, the girl finally understood everything, and immediately imagined an exaggerated version of him. Still, she hesitated whether it was fair to consider her sister a murderer, even with her great love for the saint. Knowing that Auntie couldn't do anything about her engagement to the crown prince, she racked her brains thinking about how to clear her name. Suddenly, she remembered the system mission conditions, which mentioned an unknown misunderstanding. Renee asked her brother directly if he believed her guilty of the death, and he replied that he didn't think she had done it directly. She squeezed her fingers pensively, explaining that the note mentioned a delicate condition caused by their relationship. Following her train of thought, the girl concluded that she was the murderer and guilty of her death. Kirill honestly admitted that Renee seemed a bit strange lately, and that besides, he didn't remember many things. He doubted she could have matured, but still noticed that her fervor had significantly decreased. Hearing his words about someone's death, she confirmed her conclusion, as she had never said anything like that before. The girl's brother also unexpectedly let slip that she had never said she wanted to kill the saint. Renee was visibly surprised, as she had always believed her character had repeatedly declared it. Kirill looked her in the eyes with surprise when she, almost pouncing, demanded that he tell her more details from that moment on. He asserted that it wasn't Renee who called those assassins to the saint, as everyone used to think. Hearing this, the girl abruptly pulled back, asking him again why he was pretending not to know anything. The boy said the saint is the Empire's guardian, so whoever called them must be someone who desires Ishir's downfall. And the Empire's. Renee felt cornered and asked again if he was sure she wasn't the murderer. His response infuriated her, that she wasn't smart enough, and he locked her up only because he was crazy about Lion. She started hitting Kirill when he told her that she herself announced at the ball that she had sent the assassin. Once calm, the girl became sad realizing her character was bearing someone else's sin. Her family never took her seriously because of her weakness and feared society wouldn't either. Renee intentionally tried to appear strong, wearing the mask of a cruel murderer. The girl frustratingly realized that this is how she had distanced herself from everyone and remained the same little girl. Kirill snapped her out of her thoughts, offended and clearly interested in knowing why she was so strong. Seeing the relationship improvement notification with her brother, she closed her eyes sternly and called him by his name. At his incomprehension of why he should stop this with her, Renee smacked him on the forehead. She told him he was also to blame, and he replied that she had started this whole mess. The boy hallucinated at her accusation that he had just stood by, knowing how they treated her here. His face of shame gave him away. He knew everything. No wonder he came in person with his father's message. To her surprise, Renee ruffled his hair, congratulating him on starting to change himself. He obviously hated that contact. He instantly pulled his hands off her, saying he wasn't a little child. The girl said she only wanted to congratulate him, but that didn't mean he shouldn't answer for what he did. Clutching the quill, she firmly declared that they would take responsibility and solve the problem together. She thought that, however they were, it's never too late to make amends and that it was worth trying. Deep down, she felt that only this way could Renee, back in her body, leave this family behind. Meanwhile, in Duke Marsis's mansion, where the girl was forced to return, the atmosphere was different. Renee was in shock, again surrounded by all the splendor of the available rooms. Upon returning to her room, the girl accepted the item the Queen of Waves, and the healing had found. After Kirill's words, she supposed that her character might have been writing down her experiences in a diary. She mentally blamed herself for not considering that Renee didn't send the assassin, if everyone believed her to be a villain. Knowing that the Queen of Waves found the diary under the mattress, the girl sadly assumed no one cleaned there. Feeling sorry for her character, she promised that she would definitely change her life for the better. The girl immersed herself in the writings of poor Renee, who cried because no one believed her. Although she truly didn't touch Lion, she immediately understood that this was written before she was locked up, so she decided to look for earlier writings. The girl wrote about someone named Talia, who constantly tried to talk to her, and she behaved so haughtily that Renee lied. Over and over again, she wrote about the braggart Talia, for whom she said she sent poison to Lion, and now she regretted it. Flipping through the pages, she still couldn't understand who Talia was and why she constantly incited her to do evil deeds. Despite the interest, she understood that first she needed to find information about Lion. Finally, she stumbled upon a note about how annoyed she was that she always pretended to be good, and forced her to have tea with her. Partly, the girl went to see Ishir, but she only said she baked a cake, and she knew she hadn't sent an assassin. She seemed confused when Lion laughed upon hearing that she was busy and hadn't had time to poison her. In the end, she couldn't refuse to see her again, but she still tried to do it in secret from Auntie and Ishir. Finally, the decisive moment arrived where the girl found a record about the temple, rotten to the core. In tears, she wrote that she had gotten angry at Lion because of that, but she kept saying she would stay there. Renee blamed herself for not even being able to convince her to leave the temple. She tried to suggest telling Ishir everything, but Lion said no, thinking she didn't love her, and wouldn't go against the temple for her. Renee felt absolute despair, trying to understand what the hell she was going to do with all this. The girl slammed the diary shut, realizing that if this was true, the situation changed completely. She understood that Lion also knew Renee didn't try to kill her, and that, moreover, she was her only friend. The young woman realized that her character was truly foolish. Although she wanted to believe people were mistaken in calling her a villain, she suddenly thought that perhaps that was the real reason she had ended up there. Thinking about it, she understood that among all those people, there wasn't a single person who could help her find Lion and save herself. Trying to figure out who was trying to harm those two girls, she stood up, knowing she had to find the culprit, instead of standing idly by. She was very clear that, although she lacked information, she still knew where to get it, and what she had to do to achieve it. Renee checked the adaptation mission conditions for the umpteenth time, knowing she had to complete it first and get the book. Shortly after, she was already sitting in front of her brother, who was shocked by the diary's content. At first she doubted he would believe it, but he, shocked, asked why he said it now. He enthusiastically asserted that he would have believed her if she had asked him sooner. Despite trying to appear otherwise, she knew he wouldn't have believed her even if she had. Sensing his piercing gaze, he admitted that he still didn't believe much, but he would try. Still, he ordered her not to get her hopes up, not to think he would forgive the damage to the family reputation. His mood swing amused the girl, who laughed openly upon noticing he was hiding something. Not wanting to waste more time, she held him to the sofa, ordering him to sit down and calm down once and for all. He looked at his sister surprised when she sincerely thanked him that at least now he believed her. Knowing it was hard for him to fully believe, she proposed a banquet where she would prove her words. The girl was surprised to hear that organizing it would be problematic due to her father's strictness. Kirill tried to respond, not wanting to admit that his father valued Auntie more than the two of them. He stated that his response was not very fond of extra expenses, so there had to be a special occasion, or a birthday. The girl understood that the situation was getting even more complicated because the event had to include as many people as possible. She saw it as the only way to calm the rumors about her, so she asked about the peculiarity of such an event. Kirill gave the attainment of the Master Sword level as an example, after which she asked why he didn't have a banquet. The girl suddenly became discouraged and paused to think before addressing her brother again. He looked at his sister in surprise when she asked him how much he hated Auntie. As soon as Renee promised to teach him a lesson, Kirill blushed noticeably, and then the system notified a relationship improvement. The girl was amused to see that it showed all over his face. When asked how she planned to do it, Renee suddenly leaned over her brother, casually mentioning that there was a way. He didn't understand that shiver that ran down his spine when talking to Renee, as if he had seen the very devil. After some time, the girl finally finalized her plans, and the banquet became a reality. All the guests couldn't stop commenting on the opulent decoration of the Marseilles family mansion and their level of wealth. They were forced to interrupt their chat upon noticing the scandalous Renee and Crown Prince Ishir dancing at the banquet. The main suspects immediately became the subject of debates and rumors among those present. The banquet was organized to celebrate the achievement of Lord Marseilles after defeating the man with the highest sword level. They couldn't imagine how he had mastered such power so quickly, but he only replied that they should ask his sister. During the dance of Renee and the Crown Prince, Saitsian watched them intently from the balcony. The man watched the couple thoughtfully, as if trying to decipher their next move. Kirill, standing next to him, smiled and told him to stop looking at them like that, and asked if he felt anything for Renee. It was clear how much the joke bothered Sidon, so Kirill apologized immediately. He tried to change the subject and congratulated the boy on his master sword level, but he insisted it was thanks to Renee. Sidon clearly didn't understand what was going on, so Kirill finally tried to explain the truth to him. As soon as he opened his mouth, a crowd of men interested in his success rushed towards him. Eager to talk, he tried to stop them, but they crushed his hope with an endless torrent of questions. Completely overwhelmed by so much attention, Kirill realized he only had one option left: to flee. On the balcony, Sidon kept wondering if all those rumors could really be true. Meanwhile, an unexpected couple emerged on the dance floor: Renee and the Crown Prince. The man didn't understand what the girl was planning, nor did he have any idea what was going through her head. He longed for her to share her plans and thoughts, until their sudden closeness distracted him. Receiving the waiter's glass, the girl smiled kindly at her protégé. Sidon lit up upon seeing his idol, but maintained a casual chat about how everyone was there. Just as she wanted, she agreed that she would be the center of attention, as all eyes were fixed on her. The girl looked thoughtfully at the shards of glass scattered on the floor, showing her reflection. She just concluded that she would use all of that to her advantage, as she knew perfectly well she had to put on a big show. The man didn't understand what she meant by the show, but a new individual suddenly appeared beside him. It was Crown Prince Ishir, who affectionately placed his hand on Renee's shoulder, as if he was extremely happy to see her. She ordered him to stop talking nonsense, while he chirped sweetly, asking where his beautiful companion had gone. Trying to maintain composure, Sidon advised her to go, indicating that he would stay there waiting for her. Smiling as she said goodbye, Renee, held by the Crown Prince, promised she would be back soon. As soon as they walked away, she ordered him to remove his hand from her waist, threatening to break his fingers if he didn't obey. Watching them walk away, the man recalled her words, to believe in her glory, and do what annoyed others so much. Although at first she felt relief after those words, now, for the first time, she regretted having renounced her title. Meanwhile, Renee enthusiastically presented today's procession, proposing a toast to Kirill and his achievement. The young woman felt all the mockery from those present directed at her, and at Ishir, who was by her side. Wishing to cause a real stir, she went straight to answer the question that everyone was curious about. Everyone cheered up, longing to know the method by which she had helped Kirill become stronger. Renee only looked mockingly at the spectators, asking them why she should share it. Everyone fell silent when she asked if secrets should be revealed to just anyone. Because the fewer people know, the better. One person in the crowd said that if it were true, he agreed with her refusal to reveal the secret. But they weren't sure about believing her. The spectators looked at the girl without understanding when she mentioned that they should pay her for it. All this time, Renee carefully scanned the crowd for the girl who would be the star of the show. Just as she had foreseen, she decided to draw general attention, loudly asking what truth Lady Marseilles wished to hear. Renee shone with predatory eyes, confirming that the one she wanted to see had just appeared. It turned out to be Talia, the daughter of the Count of Cyprus, speaking enthusiastically that truth is too abstract a concept. Renee smiled with satisfaction, clearly not expecting the guest to decide to come out of hiding so quickly and show herself. Talia was the villain from Renee's diary, about whom, shortly before the banquet, they had brought her interesting information. She hid many secrets that Renee had to reveal to prove her innocence. She was the same girl who had made her look like a villain and ruined her life. The girl explained her words by saying she didn't see in Renee the desire to share her secret, and she mentioned again her attempts to kill the saint. Just as the Crown Prince was about to defend her, she cut short the attempts to tarnish her family's reputation at the Marquis mansion. Hearing this, Talia just smiled maliciously, asking since when she cared about her family's reputation. Unwilling to tolerate further abuse, Renee smiled with satisfaction, as if preparing for battle. Raising her glass, she declared moderately that her words made sense, as truth is abstract, and it can be a lie depending on who hears it. Finally, she added that she wouldn't change the conditions, as it would be boring to share her secret so easily. At first, the opponent was perplexed, clearly feeling that something wasn't right. A man immediately interrupted her, asking what truth mattered since, according to her, it had to be something unusual. After hearing her response, Talia convinced herself once again that Renee had never been so open and resolute. Seeing with what skill she demanded they try a little harder, she thought again that she had transformed into another person. This dispute caused much whispering among the nobility, eager to know what would happen next. And Sheer finally intervened, saying that, although he didn't want to interfere, those words seemed very rude to him. With an air of feigned sadness, Talia apologized, but she reminded him that he himself suspected Lady Marsize. She almost attacked Renee. He said that he was the one who decided to kill the saint because she was his fiancée. His words caused an uproar among the spectators, who supported her, but they were interrupted by a gesture. Ishir, tired of hearing that, declared that the body found was not Leanne's. It was all a setup. Amidst gasps of astonishment, he revealed that the court magician had examined the body and discovered it had black hair. Everyone was stunned to hear that even the suicide note was forged to harm her. And the prince, Renee, lamented that they hadn't found the culprit, but he was surely related to Lion's kidnapping. To do something like that, Taya collapsed, listening to the heated debates about why someone would do that. If everyone loved the saint, before the main instigator could mention Renee Marsize again, she interrupted her with a shout. Silencing her, the girl clenched her fan angrily, as if wanting revenge on Renee for accusing her of sending assassins to the saint. Talia always envied Lion. Both were daughters of counts, but only one received the blessing of the gods. Among her peers, the girl was famous for her magic, always capturing the attention of everyone around her. But all those advantages faded with the appearance of the saint, protector of the entire empire. That's why she hated Lion, because she possessed more outstanding qualities than her own. What an injustice! The news of her imminent engagement to the crown prince was the last straw for Talia. Consumed by envy, rage gnawed at her insides at that moment. She didn't understand what was so good about that hypocrite. She desperately tried to do something, but she knew what would happen if she touched the prince's fiancé. But fortunately, she heard rumors about Renee Marsize, who supposedly mistreated the saint. She felt admiration for her for a moment. She discovered how weak and cowardly she really was. What a disappointment! Talia boiled with rage, seeing that fool thinking she was all that. Feeling betrayed by Renee, she decided to force her to take the blame for a poison she hadn't even sent. The intriguer was happy. She knew that this way she could humiliate the hateful saint and get rid of the stupid Renee. Now she tried to defend herself, calling the accusation absurd due to lack of evidence. Renee interrupted her, suddenly blurting out that there was evidence. But she didn't have it, others did. To Talia's surprise, the girl approached threateningly, reminding her of the price for her secret to reach the rank of master swordsman. The young woman felt a slight thrill facing an opponent on her level, whom she had previously underestimated. Renee did not share her enthusiasm at all, and directly accused her of being a pervert. Even the crown prince was astonished, watching the confrontation between the two. In the end, he concluded that she didn't need his help, seeing how boldly she attacked her rival. He suddenly remembered their talk in the forest, when she reminded him of the lost bet that forced him to help her. And Sheer felt total bewilderment upon hearing her promise to make him emperor, and asked how he could trust her. She brandished her sword furiously, angrily reminding him that he had lost the bet to her. Wanting to make an impactful impression, she focused threateningly, preparing to strike with all her might. With a devastating blow, Renee raised the enormous tree pillars surrounding them in a kilometer radius. Despite the spectacle before their eyes, imposing in its magnitude, she sentenced that more power was still needed. The crown prince cautiously inspected the stumps, wondering who she was to possess such strength. She plainly declared that they could forget cooperation when he said she still didn't seem like a trustworthy person to him. To her surprise, he agreed, arguing that he had lost the bet and that, moreover, she was Lion's friend. The man looked the girl seriously in the eyes and declared that, this time, he would trust her. Involuntarily, he wondered how she knew about their friendship, and he replied that he found the letter she never sent. Renee automatically thought about how valuable that letter was to Lion, since she even hid it in a safe. Astonished, she asked if he doubted her, when he said that Lion always tried to protect her. And Sheer smiled and declared that Renee should show herself to be brighter, instead of trying to kill the saint. A new argument arose regarding the fact that she could also suspect him. So he said again that this is why he would try to trust her. Finally, wanting to settle the matter, Renee extended her hand to him, telling him he had to prove he could be trusted. However, she stopped when she saw his surprised face, which automatically made her think about the nonsense she had said. Wishing to complete the system mission quickly, She clarified that she had to give him something as proof. Renee looked at him surprised when he started talking about having something, but that he couldn't give it to her now. Looking for a guarantee, Ishir proposed a collaboration, after which he would give her the proof when he could trust her. She thanked the crown prince sarcastically when he declared that he, for his part, would also do everything to earn her trust. Despite her displeasure, Renee summarized that she would help him take the throne and he would help her to give her proof afterward. And Shur looked at the girl cautiously upon hearing the phrase, "Let's shake hands," after which she explained it was a deal. Without much hesitation, he shook Renee's hand and repeated a previously unusual phrase for him. Talia found herself in a difficult situation when the young woman offered her easier conditions, declaring that the truth was hard for her. Renee demanded that they bring her proof of the saint's murder, adding that it could be any kind of information. The girl immediately warned that it had to be real information and that she would not forgive lies aimed at extracting secrets from her. Renee mentally calculated that if people started suspecting each other, someone would confess to having proof. Talia tried to move away, saying she didn't understand what she was talking about, since she herself had previously claimed to have sent the assassin. Renee sighed with exhaustion, finally understanding what her opponent was plotting, after which an idea occurred to her. She glared at the crown prince, letting him know that she would soon put her plan into action. Renee deliberately moved close to Ishir and declared that yes, she had indeed been talking about that. The girl used her ability to change appearance and, sobbing, claimed she was doing it because of threats from Lady Kiprose. Talia looked at Renee wide-eyed, completely caught off guard by such a turn of events. Trembling with agitation, she asked how it was possible that the daughter of a count was threatening the daughter of the Duke of Marchais himself. The crown prince sternly decreed that it was possible, since she knew Lady Marchais's weaknesses. Hearing this, Talia went into shock, unable to understand how everything had taken such a dark turn. And Sheer intentionally hugged Renee, adding that she was also trying to use her engagement to Liang as an excuse. Immediately after, he declared that Talia was unscrupulously blackmailing poor Renee because he loved her. Everyone was stunned by the prince's declaration, unable to imagine that he could love someone like Lady Marchais. As if waking from a spell, Talia opened her mouth in surprise, finally understanding the true meaning of his words. Renee tried to hide a giggle upon seeing everyone's reaction, noticing that he was acting quite well. A short while ago, Lady Martinez was discussing this plan with Ikir, who was visibly annoyed at having to pretend to be in love. The girl insisted on it, mentioning that she didn't like it either, but she was forced to take this step for her reputation. His assumption that their connection would only strengthen suspicions of her involvement in Lion's death noticeably irritated Renee. She understood it was a risky move, but her precarious situation left her no other choice. Renee understood that she would have to use another approach, so she thought finding a new villain would be an excellent solution. That night, Ikir agreed with her opinion, but still believed that involving third parties in the scandal could be very risky. The girl masterfully convinced him, providing a multitude of rational arguments for this decision. The crown prince fell into deep thought, analyzing all the pros and cons of the proposed solution. He knew that if he used false rumors, they could be an effective weapon in this situation. Barely containing her disgust, the girl declared that this was why they should be lovers. Causing a scandal, finally, she stated that although it was disgusting to her, it was better than doing nothing and not finding Lion. Crown Prince Ishir looked at the girl with surprise, but still nodded, agreeing with her. In the end, Taya tried to sow doubts about their love story, saying it was the other way around, and only Renee was in love. And Sheer declared that it was so until their engagement, but then he was too busy with matters of the empire and did not recognize true love. Moving closer to Renee, he falsely added that he realized his feelings only after being close to another girl. The crown prince gently caressed her face, saying that now no one could shake his heart, because it belonged to Renee. The man added dramatically that he missed his chance, and when he finally decided to confess, Renee's feelings were different. He presented himself as the only one who wasn't faithful, making it clear that Renee was not to blame for anything. Even Renee was shocked by his performance. She almost saw him as a top actor. Deep down, she knew the script was terrible, but he made it believable with his acting. Sayedin silently observed all this drama. Completely unaware of the show, she instantly caught the improvisation. When he said he wouldn't tolerate them accusing his beloved, Renee didn't even imagine the wild idea that was about to cross the prince's mind. She looked at him confusedly. What did he mean by this not being the right time? And Chur looked intensely at the young woman. He said he couldn't wait any longer and took out a small box. Renee tensed instantly, mentally begging him to stop, sensing what was coming. He insistently pulled her close and placed the ring on her finger, asking her for another chance. Her face showed rage and repulsion, but she had no choice but to accept. Although she completed the mission, this event left Renee in a rather dark mood, trying to drown her anger for ruining her plan. The girls spent the night hugging a bottle. Upon hearing the theories about their constellations, she made a gesture, not wanting to think about the crown prince. Renee thoughtfully looked at her reward, remembering that she did all this for herself. A while later, Satan joined her, asking only for a moment of her time. Upon hearing that she was not in the mood, he quickly said he would leave as soon as she answered one thing. The man timidly asked her why she didn't tell him anything, if he was the one who discovered Talia Kipro's misdeeds. He was sure that if she had revealed that information, she wouldn't have had to resort to the prince. Renee thought she accepted him as an apprentice because she needed him, but she didn't think he would bring up the topic. She abruptly asked him if he thought people would believe it, because the important thing here was to put on a good show. Shedden looked at her surprised upon hearing that those skills were his, not hers. That was the reason why she decided to solve the problem instead of waiting for him to do it. Clenching his fist, he affirmed that the proof he found would serve for people to know whether to believe or not. The man was stunned when she unexpectedly reminded him that she was his teacher, and she had to resolve her own affairs alone. Hearing that she couldn't put everything on her student, he, embarrassed, asked if that was the reason for her action. Drinking from the bottle, she asked if he was referring to her relationship with Ikir, disconcerting him by calling him by name. Upon hearing that they called each other by their names, he became sad, expressing his hope that she didn't love anyone else. She explained that it was theater, and that she didn't even know Ikir would propose to her. His statement that they had agreed to say they felt mutual affection visibly disconcerted her. Even though she repeated her plan, Sidon continued to show changes in his mood. Closing his eyes, he suddenly declared that he had to adapt to the new things to stay by her side. The man realized that he wanted her to use him whenever she needed help. He clearly felt that he no longer wanted to feel as powerless as he did at that banquet. When he saw her with the crown prince, the image of her dancing with him, fully trusting, immediately arose in his imagination. Sometime later, Sidon appeared at the prince's palace with the intention of obtaining the title of Marquis, which he had recently renounced. The crown prince was visibly surprised and tried to remind him that, although she was assigned to him, he rejected her. Sidon coldly declared that if he couldn't give him that title, he would ask for it in another empire. And Shur finally agreed, aware that he could not hand over the sword master to another state. And he noticed that she had changed a lot. The crown prince pointed out that for that, he would have to complete a mission, since Sidon had already refused once. Upon hearing his willingness to complete the mission, he ordered him to find out about a strange movement on the northern border. The man reviewed the document and noticed that the number of monsters was growing, while the infection and hunger were spreading in the surroundings. He asked why the temple wasn't dealing with the problem, considering it was related to dark magic. The prince replied that the temple people were very cowardly, and that was why they wanted someone to go with them. Upon hearing that he was ready to leave as soon as everything was ready, Ishira felt, reminding him that winter would soon arrive. As soon as Saijin left the office, he was stopped by a question. What did Renee mean to him? Upon deciding to obtain the title, he coldly asked what answer he wished to hear. After which, the other replied that he wanted an honest answer. The man was paralyzed, with a mute question in his head about what Renee Marseilles really meant to him. Immediately, the image of a magnificent girl arose in his mind, leading him to think that he could not reason about the meaning of that person. Sijden finally replied, saying that he could not give a precise answer, but that he was sure it was more than for himself. The crown prince felt a sharp attack of anger, and the realization that he was becoming as brazen as Renee. Suddenly, Sidon's phrase echoed in his head, making him question the meaning of Renee to him. Meanwhile, the girl looked thoughtfully at the notification of a new mission, defend her honor. Upon reading the received book, she discovered that she would only complete the missions if she accepted a romantic relationship. The young woman clearly did not want to marry the crown prince, but she understood it was a necessity. The evil blood lord shouted for him to break off the engagement immediately. but she replied that it was impossible. Faced with the negative reaction of the asteroids, she declared that she wasn't marrying yet, and then blocked them. The girl collapsed onto the sofa, thinking she needed a break, as she had only been completing missions this whole time. She hoped reading the book would relieve her, but almost everything written in the first chapter she had already discovered on her own. It turns out that Lion and Ishir were not lovers, but rather the saint was Renee's friend. She also concluded that her heroine was not a villain, but a victim. Even more unexpected for her was that Lion and Renee turned out to be the main heroines of the novel. A separate and inexplicable point for her was her appearance in Renee Marsai's body. She still couldn't understand how she got into the novel, as in her previous life there was no self in the plot, since it was a world inside a novel. This incongruity was not the only one that gave the young woman no peace. She was referring to Sayatsin Ansarad, whom she considered one of the main characters of the novel due to his early appearance. Renee could not understand how it was possible that his name did not appear in the book, not even with his beauty and power. She supposed he might appear later, since Renee had never been to the lower quarters. But he was no longer an important character. The girl sat thoughtfully, pondering whether she might find an answer to that question after reading the second chapter. To her surprise, at that very moment a knock was heard at the door, followed by Sayatsin's voice. He immediately realized that he had appeared at an inopportune moment, not imagining he was the cause of her headache. Aware that she sounded harsh, she invited him in, claiming simple tiredness. She was surprised to see her drinking bourbon straight from the bottle, asking what was wrong. He handed her the documents, adding that he came to report on the Kiprose clan. Upon hearing her question about the sentence, he replied that there was no trial. The temple intervened. Renee inquired why, and he replied that Talia tried to assassinate the saint. She was outraged that they left Lion alone in a critical moment, and now they demanded something. He explained it was at the saint's request, insisting that she was fine and the punishment was unnecessary. The girl thought that if Lion had wanted to punish the guilty party, Renee would be in prison. Sidyun noticed her sudden immersion in thought and asked if she was all right. He said that the temple people were clever, taking advantage by intervening and canceling the trial. This way they could condemn Count and Countess Quiprose, the princess's biggest followers. When the temple supported the prince, they even said they kept it secret at the request of the saint herself, and that they sent Talia to a monastery. Sidyun said that, just in case, he found out the name of the monastery, but he stopped when they offered him a glass. Absorbed in her, he asked if she was all right, considering they hadn't even apologized to her. She herself understood that she had no right to punish Talia, as the apologies should be directed to her heroine, Renee. To her surprise, the man informed her that he wouldn't be able to visit her for a while. Renee looked at him discontentedly upon hearing that. Apparently, he had many pending matters. After hesitating for a moment, he revealed that strange phenomena were occurring on the northern borders, and he had to go investigate them. He specified what he said, mentioning traces of dark magic and an unexpected difference. Behind the shocked young woman's back, thunder rumbled, accompanying his words about the image of a tower he had seen. Renee fell silent from the shock, trying to calm down and regain her composure by any means necessary. She barely managed to ask about the tower, after which he said not to worry, and he attributed it to hallucinations. Unable to control herself, she shouted that there had to be some explanation of what that tower looked like. Feeling the pressure, he said he only heard that it was a tall black tower, whose top could not be seen. In an instant, Renee became truly terrifying, staring him down and declaring that she must go to that tower. Some time after their conversation, she realized that if she closed her eyes, she started to remember different things. Over and over again, she saw a black tower rising and tearing the clouds, as well as monsters killing people. Such was the cruel world of the tower of her past, in which the concept of mercy did not exist. Among everything that tormented her in the walls of that tower, there was also the victim who brought her salvation. On another of these occasions, the girl looked around in surprise and opened her eyes when an unfamiliar voice pulled her out of the whirlwind of memories. She found it endearing and stroked Sidon's head, noticing his concern, without even knowing what was going through his mind. He just smiled shyly, feeling the contact of his mentor. What a moment! She barely relaxed when Ashira demanded respect, and that she shouldn't stroke another man in front of her beloved. She, without hesitation, asked him why he was accompanying them and started criticizing. But he invented an excuse instantly. The others, very skeptical, did not believe that it would be suspicious if one of the two disappeared. Renee asked the Queen of the Waves if she had found the tower, when suddenly she gave a signal. The Crown Prince called her, surprised to see her running at full speed in one direction. The young woman was astonished to feel several forces, one of them undoubtedly belonging to the tower. Both Sidon and Ishir noticed a strange energy, a dangerous energy with unpleasant sensations. The prince tried to hug her, talking about the danger, but Sidon immediately pulled his hand away from her body. Conflict erupted instantly. Sidon argued that a woman's body is untouchable, having no patience for his protests. Renee pushed them away, demanding absolute silence from them. Sidon felt a sacred power and supposed it came from the temple, suggesting the girl rest there. Seeing they wouldn't get anywhere this way, Renee dropped the bomb. In that direction, they would run into priests. They looked at her stunned when she ordered them to go first and deal with them. While she was investigating something, the Crown Prince did not hide his anger. He said he would go with her. Renee replied sharply, "It's my business." He was not the only one rejected. Sidon insisted that it also concerned him, but he received the same refusal, extending his hand. He firmly declared that they would only be in the way with their presence. Before they could react, Renee disappeared, fleeing at full speed and asking them to wait for her. They tried to catch up with her immediately, but she was faster, moving with the help of a polar bear. Finally, she took a cautious look, relieved to have left them behind. She instantly used her trap ability, like a fine net to catch her prey. The girl looked with satisfaction at the magic web, thinking that several people usually use it. Although she was alone, she was not very worried because she had her spirits with her. Concentrated, she tracked every corner, looking for what she needed with her magical companions. Besides hunters, she saw users of sacred power looking around, avoiding her company. Finally, she jumped off the bear and advanced, feeling a sinister aura that chilled her blood. To her worst fear, she had a very tall tower in front of her, bigger than where she suffered so much. She was surprised to suddenly see a system window appear before her eyes. She read carefully what it said, seeing an offer to verify a newly discovered additional mission. The girl was stunned to see the reconnaissance mission, the completion of which would give her the ability to summon her constellations. Constellations are all-powerful deities that far exceed human capabilities. To make themselves known, they grant their power to the people with whom they make a contract. They can also support these people by watching how they achieve what they desire. Renee immediately remembered her constellations, who often amused her with their carefree behavior. Now, these constellations felt a certain dependence on Renee, as it depended on her whether they would be released or not. They were very different in character and demands, so the Queen of the Waves often showed compassion for the girl. In this way, the Lord of Temptation was often distinguished by his provocative behavior. This was partly because previously constellations could help indirectly, but now there was the possibility of rebirth. The girl understood that she would have to fight in the tower anyway, so she would fulfill their request. And she would summon. She saw that the tower doors were closed and decided to enter by force. Anticipating monsters, the girl activated her power, ready for whatever came. To her surprise, the spacious place was empty, which immediately put her on alert. Renee advanced and found herself in front of a notable stone plaque on a pedestal. Upon taking the plaque, she compared the situation with her memories, as such a floor did not exist in her previous life. She was even more amazed to see a system message explaining that, due to failures, they resorted to this method. After a few seconds, the realization hit her as she finally understood what she held in her hands. Looking around, Renee noticed another plaque, also with a system message. It indicated that there was a system error that caused a failure with the reward, and they were very sorry. Frustration flooded her when they proposed to correct the system error. In that same tower, aware of the huge responsibility, they mentioned that they would help her by intervening. Renee was perplexed to read that this time the difficulty would be much lower, and she should enjoy the novel. Her gaze reflected all the fury boiling within her after such deception. An epic mission notice appeared. She had to complete the tower to return to her world. She received her new task with a forced smile, as she didn't like it at all. Distrust flooded her regarding the promises that there would be no more errors, given how many times they had deceived her. The constellations, compassionate, suggested she check the first floor. Then she remembered that she longed to leave this body. She understood that they could feel the same desperation, as they would only be free when she left that body. Again, Filled with righteous indignation, she assumed that the difficulty of the trials would be reduced by the system. She felt a torrent of energy upon perceiving the support of the constellations. Renee was in shock. The condition to pass the first floor was to choose 3 heroes and write their names. The girl left the tower, feeling defeated by a romantic trial she refused to overcome. She left the tower in silence. She simply didn't have a single male protagonist candidate. As soon as she returned, her worried companions immediately surrounded her. Isidoro anxiously asked if she was cold, while Ishir examined her for injuries. Renee was filled with irritation. She obviously didn't want them constantly buzzing around her. She was still confused by the last task, where she had to choose her romantic hero. The persistent men brought her back to reality, bombarding her with questions about her sudden disappearance. The girl was forced to acknowledge his concern. All she could do was hope the conversation would end soon. After a while, they finally reached a quiet area, where she proposed discussing everything in order. Renee confronted the crown prince, telling him she didn't like him following her, although she understood his motives. Sidon replied instantly, euphoric that the girl called him by his name. To his surprise, Renee frowned, abruptly reminding them that she hated overprotection. She immediately reassured him, stating she didn't need protection, as he apologized for the trouble, and said he was worried. The young woman was flabbergasted to see a notification of a sudden improvement in her relationship with Ikir von Ramdish. Sidon suddenly blurted out a question about what exactly was bothering her, adding that he would eliminate her concern. Without understanding his point, Renee simply repeated that she didn't want to be overprotected. She didn't expect her request to have such a positive response, but still improved her relationship with Sidon by 100 points. The man looked at her gratefully, relieved that the problem wasn't him, and promised not to do anything that displeased her. Renee was stunned by his declaration, realizing that he was using a rejection and seduction tactic like a fox. Finally, the fake lover interrupted the chat, asking where the hell she had been. With a bored look, Renee replied that she had only gone out for a walk and that it was none of his business. The crown prince smiled satisfied when she asked Cygnus to leave them alone for a moment. The man hesitated, grudgingly contemplating such an unpleasant request. Finally, he left in silence, and Renee could face him. A moment ago, and she'd hated her. The man stared at her, preparing for whatever she might say. Finally, crossing his arms, he snapped at her annoyedly what the hell she was thinking when she gave him the ring. She knew how he felt about her character. She had read it in the cursed book. Despite his attempts to get closer, she'd continued to treat her persona with disdain. Lady Marseilles begged the prince again and again to take pity, but her feelings were rejected. Right now, he looked at her anxiously, while she said that his sudden interest disturbed her. He being so cold. Seeing his silence, she, irritated, demanded he say something, anything. To her surprise, he finally spoke, admitting he had foreseen it, as he initially had another plan. Observing the ring closely, he declared that he was aware of the threat this relationship posed to his reputation. Despite everything, he honestly confessed that for some reason it seemed right to him. The young woman looked at the crown prince skeptically as he affirmed that, upon waking up, the ring was already on his finger. Admitting he had crossed all limits, he got up and concluded that, to begin with, he would take a step back. Renee instantly suspected something was wrong, noticing the sudden change in his attitude. Finally, he announced that he would return to the capital, arguing that, in reality, he shouldn't be there. As he left, he involuntarily reflected on how he had always treated Renee coldly for considering her useless. In his memory, that fateful day immediately resurfaces, burned into his mind. Everything was triggered during Lion's consecration banquet, which he had to attend. That day, as always, he was forced to maintain tedious conversations, longing for the end. It was then that Renee exploded again, revealing in public that she sent the assassin to the saint. Viciously, he pointed his finger at Lion, vowing to unmask her hypocrisy and deceit. The crown prince nervously watched the saint's face, silently wishing she would silence Renee. He knew she could do it, as she was the only saint in the empire, and unlike him, she could control her. The last incident with his father burst into his head, where he hit him again for a transgression. He only humiliated him again and again, telling him that his duty was to protect him, because he and the empire are one. And Shur looked straight ahead with hatred, hearing words about how useless he was, unlike his brother. Right after that incident, he ran into an enraged Renee, demanding explanations from the saint. She was forced to stop, feeling a masculine hand grip her wrist tightly. The young woman looked surprised at the source of her interruption and was stunned to see the crown prince beside her. Despite all her disappointment and fury, Renee still felt flustered receiving attention from this man. She carefully examined his face, whose expression did not bode well at all. Feeling how fed up he was with this silly girl, he roughly shoved her forward without hesitation. The crown prince lunged at the girl, asking if she herself wasn't tired of all this. Trembling with sadness, Renee clung with her last strength to the edge of the man's clothes, as if begging him to forgive her. Sobbing, she told him she was scared, and that he knew she had no one else to rely on. Suddenly, the crown prince finally understood the reason why Lion behaved like this, and endured everything. He realized that she couldn't remain silent, as she felt pity for Renee as much as for him. Thus, the man understood that it was not Lion, but poor and miserable Renee, who resembled him. The young woman looked at the crown prince in shock when he coldly declared that he had been disappointed enough by her already. And he had to be clear. Understanding why he didn't want to see her by his side, he said he wouldn't give her either his feelings, nor a chance. After the harsh conversation, the girl finally went to her room, where she could finally lie down and rest. An awkward silence was interrupted by Seed, who suddenly spoke about a topic she didn't understand. The girl asked him directly what he meant by him also wanting to call her. She looked at him intently when he finished the sentence by saying he wanted to call her by her name. Renee, without hesitation, told him to pronounce her name and do whatever he wanted, since no one forbade him. Suddenly, the young woman was plunged into a whirlwind of memories from their last conversation, where he discovered her relationship with Ishir. She was about to ask him what was wrong when she grimly replied that she would tell him so he would get used to her. She confessed that she had refused to be his teacher because she feared creating close bonds, but in the end she accepted. This was because in her past life, she learned that she should not get attached to people. Renee was cruelly taught that you never know when a person will die or when their paths will separate. Despite this understanding, she still ended up getting attached to those around her. Even with so many losses, she still held countless pleasant memories. All those people took the first step, even if she tried to reject them, but in the end, they abandoned her or died. The idea that every close relationship brings pain settled deeply in her heart, from which she can never get rid. He affirmed that the closer people get, the more they begin to doubt their decisions. He ruffled her hair, saying that was why he wanted to be alone. To her surprise, Salen called her by her name with complete confidence, mimicking her gesture. The man smiled radiantly, assuring her that he would follow her wherever she went. He argued that he was a diligent pupil. And bam, another 100-point increase in their relationship. The girl replied with a smile that yes, he was a model student, although she thought he was cunning as a fox, or cute as a puppy. Renee realized she had never met anyone like Sion, so special and loyal. Despite how pleasant everything was, the idea that she was better off alone returned to her head. She smiled again, thinking that was why he shouldn't cross the line or distance himself, but stay where they were. Alone, she thoughtfully contemplated the notification that gave her the option to choose her relationship with Sion. The young woman was visibly confused, debating between a mentor relationship and a romantic one. Instantly, a debate arose among the constellations. Marry now or not get involved with anyone. Renee addressed the Lord of Temptation with disgust, recalling the times she listened to him, and ended up getting into trouble. Meanwhile, the evil Lord of Blood proposed taking care of the male protagonist candidates. Knowing she lacked one candidate, she still agreed to listen to the Lord of Temptation's proposal. He, with complete certainty, simply declared that he himself was offering as a male protagonist candidate. Not even 2 days passed before she accepted his proposal and completed the tower's first mission. Aware that there was no turning back, she found herself facing a magic labyrinth. She shattered the new slab, indicating to start romantic relationships with the selected candidates. Renee, irritated, slid her finger across the screen upon seeing a system window offering her to check the sympathy level. She immediately ran into a bunch of ambiguous comments from constellations who didn't believe she could have good relationships. A few minutes later, she understood their way of thinking, directed towards the fact that she had never had sympathy or relationships. The girl was furious, aware of the label her companions had hung on her. Trying to clear her name, she declared that she would take the initiative and dare to take that step. In the end, she didn't have the courage to find out so she decided to return to the capital. The young woman again left the tower floor in embarrassment, leaving what comes next hanging in the air. Back at the camp, she heard that Sayatsin had pending matters, so he had to go alone. Although important matters awaited him, his face still radiated the desire to go with her. Breaking eye contact with the girl, he concluded that this matter was truly crucial. Renee smiled pleasantly, knowing that thanks to her spell, the tower would be impossible to find. Even so, she asked him if she should stay there, after which he insisted that she shouldn't. Renee stroked his head with a smile, saying she thought he would beg her. But he held back. She looked at him stunned, hearing that if he started begging her, she would leave him. Adjusting his hair, Sidon calmly replied that he was her true disciple, not a false lover. Finally, he smiled, asking her to spend time only with him and not with the crown prince. Even days later, she kept turning that conversation over in her mind, realizing that she had fallen into his trap. Her mind flooded with images of his beautiful features and his abundant hair. The girl, menacingly, addressed Kirill when he asked about her ear-to-ear smile. He clearly didn't share her confident attitude, as he was still upset about her sudden disappearance. Kirill declared that when she vanished, everyone started asking him about that secret method. She knew that even if someone managed to extract that method, applying it wouldn't be easy at all. That ability was the secret of the Bloody Order, called the Bloody Method. To gain power, Renee calmly concluded that a normal human would have died, so it wasn't that easy. Finally, Renee's brother asked her again where she had been all this time. Not wanting to reveal the real reason, the young woman skillfully changed the subject. She asked him if he had found anything, and he handed her a folder with gossip about Thalia. The girl found the key information, the truth she demanded at the ball. She expressed her discontent, saying she wanted to see the whole iceberg, not just the tip. Kirill, confused, asked where to find it, and she inquired about the dark mage behind all this. He hesitated, saying he didn't think anyone existed who would benefit from her suffering. The girl clarified that she was thinking of Lion, and even mentioned Ishir, who was nearby. After thinking for a bit, they concluded that Princess Aiden might be behind everything. Renee confidently stated that they must meet in person to prove her guilt. Kirill was completely shocked, imagining how she planned to arrange that meeting. Finally, the girl smiled cheerfully, asking him if he didn't want to go to the Imperial Palace. Renee already had an action plan, wanting to meet Ishir and assess his sympathy level. Shortly after, she was already preparing for her departure to the Imperial Palace. She went to the Water Maiden, asking where Lion was since she commanded the waters, and collecting data. As expected, she found traces of Lion, gathering the necessary information through the water. The girl clearly understood that she had to find Lion as soon as possible, as that could solve everything. She was surprised when the Water Maiden suddenly declared that all clues intersected at one place. She quickly created a water map and showed a spot near the tower where Lion disappeared. She was about to express her assumption when she was hurriedly called to leave. A minute later, the young woman met her brothers, captivating them with her delicate beauty and refinement. They were in shock. They clearly hadn't expected Renee to opt for such an elegant outfit. It turned out that Auntie also wanted to go with them, which generated no objection from Renee. Suddenly, a notification appeared about a completed mission to improve her relationship with her brothers. She looked perplexedly at the available information about Auntie, looking for changes in his attributes. She also checked Kirill, whose relationship was much better compared to her brother. Not wanting to delay, the young woman elegantly touched their shoulders and apologized for the delay. To her surprise, Auntie reacted quite strangely, caused by the young woman's elegant appearance. The man was trying to silence his brother. When the latter blurted out that it was the first time he had seen her like this, he added that before she always chose flashy outfits, and revealing ones that captured attention. The girl only replied with a smile that she is at the age where she worries about where she is. At first, he didn't understand why Renee dressed so provocatively, but now he understood that this is how she hid her miserable situation. She was even more surprised when Kirill noticed that she no longer looked at them as if she wanted to murder them. Hearing that with sadness, he understood that before, no one knew how beautiful his heroine's smile was. He expressed his hope that when she leaves this world, she will be happy and dress as she truly desires. He also sincerely wished for her to smile calmly at those who truly love her, and he will do everything to achieve it. In the end, they managed to reach the Imperial Palace, which required a lot of effort. They requested an audience with the princess, but were rejected, after which she went to Ishiru unsuccessfully. Aware that she cannot give up, she finally opened the doors of the correct office, instilling fear in the youngsters. Before her appeared Duke Siller Marsis, gifting her with a stern look. He was extremely surprised, as he clearly did not expect to see her in the imperial palace with her brothers. The man immediately reprimanded them for not managing the estate well and not restraining Renee. At first, she didn't understand why he was reprimanding Auntie, so she decided to confess that she proposed the trip. Siller instantly grabbed her shoulder with an iron grip and, maintaining his coldness, said it was his fault for not watching her. Not wanting to give in, she declared that it wasn't necessary, as she was of legal age and he couldn't monitor her. The man did not take his threatening gaze off his daughter, while saying that she herself knew someone should restrain her. Looking at her dejected brothers, she finally understood how things stood here. Suddenly, he thought the problem wasn't the estate itself, but the farmer managing it. After proposing to sit down and talk, he decided to get straight to the point and mention the reason for their visit. With a serene smile, he asked the reason for her presence at such a delicate time. Renee knew she couldn't yield, so smiling, she told him she lacked political intuition. She reminded him of her relationship with the prince and how she saved his lineage from collapse. The brothers shuddered when she questioned his lack of insight. She then stated that powerful factions accused her and her family didn't help, but supported the falsehoods. She concluded that he did nothing, and yet treats her like a simple headache. Without giving him time to react, she rhetorically declared that it was all because she acted on her own. Not wanting to create conflict, she used all her charm and said she trusted he would understand her like a beloved daughter. Without losing her smug smile, she listened intently as he admitted that not believing her was a huge mistake. Despite his words, it was clear that the man was boiling with fury over what he heard. She forced a smile to ease the tension, but internally called him an old fox. Trying to act like an understanding father, he asked her to let him know next time so he could help her. Kirill and Auntie looked surprised at the girl, who stated she would keep that in mind. Then Renee smiled with satisfaction. Everything had gone exactly as she planned. She discovered that her father was the main conspirator of the duchy, so she decided to prepare herself. She was still thinking about asking him for a meeting with Iden when he suddenly said he was proud. Both she and her brothers were shocked to hear him praise someone for the first time. He explained that he had always been worried, but after the talk he saw she could stand on her own 2 feet. Their faces darkened when he said she was better than those who had all the family support. Renee understood he wasn't complimenting her, but comparing them, so she retorted that he wasn't a master swordsman either. The man looked at his brazen daughter in astonishment, ignoring that she could see his stats. She barely hinted that he acted like a sword master since he was 3 years old, and he already forbade her from comparing herself. The brothers were shocked, realizing that Renee was trying to protect them at the expense of herself. Hearing him boast about his achievements, she casually mentioned that in his youth warriors achieved even greater levels. She instantly saw an improvement in her relationship with her brothers and declared that she respected her father. Asking for forgiveness, like 2 chicks, they looked suspiciously at their sister when she suggested spending more time together. Finally, he naturally asked her for a meeting with the princess, to which he instantly agreed. Now the girl understood how everyone on the estate managed to make fun of Renee, as if they were conspiring. After this conversation, she realized that all this was the work of Siller Marsis. To say goodbye, the man asked her if she wanted to add anything else, something she clearly desired, but she understood that for today it was enough. Renee hurried towards the exit, wishing her father good night. Shortly after, she arrived at the longed-for palace where Princess Iden resides. The girl disliked what she saw so much that she felt her teeth grind before the meeting. It irritated her that Iden made her wait so long, as if she were annoying her on purpose. Finally, Renee entered and politely greeted the princess. Observing the hostile atmosphere, she immediately understood why Ishir himself feared her. Renee analyzed her characteristics instantly, although most were hidden. Feeling that the conversation would be difficult, she said she came for a new clue in Lion's case. The girl staggered upon seeing a sudden system notification, demanding she define her attitude towards Iden. She was distracted upon hearing the princess's invitation to sit next to her. Renee sat down, contemplating how to proceed. Not knowing Ishir's level of affection, Iden, with renewed interest, asked about that new clue the girl had mentioned. Patting her pocket, she wanted to know if she was aware of Siding's shipment to the north. The princess nodded, clarifying that it was an order from her brother to support the northern temple. Immediately after, she examined with surprise the contents of the box Renee extended to her. They were deer bones, stripped by the intense holy energy emanating from them. Standing up, Renee questioned the princess about her thoughts. Whose bones could these be? After a moment, she replied that they were the knees of an animal caught in a trap. It was imperceptible, as someone had restored the bones with holy power. Knowing that few would use that power on a dying animal, Renee inquired about Iden's suspicions. Without waiting for a response, she herself answered, admitting that only one person came to mind. She also made sure that no priest had passed through that area. To her surprise, the princess approached eagerly, commenting that it was very interesting. Iden reminded her that recently Renee did not want the return of the saint, but now suddenly decides to look for her. She also mentioned that Ishir and Lion's marriage was fictional, and that when she returned, Lady Marsi's would not be necessary. When Renee replied that she knew that, the woman told her that her brother chose people according to his needs. Upon hearing her rhetorical question about whether Ishir would choose her instead of the throne, she said that the Marsi's family could also provide support. The situation was becoming increasingly tense, which further compelled her to forget the agreement with him. The princess clearly felt how difficult this moment was for Renee. The intimate conversation between the two young women was interrupted by a sudden sound coming from behind the closed door. The girl looked forward, surprised to hear the question of whether she really cared who Ishir would choose. Ishir appeared before them, panting, paralyzed on the threshold of the door. He fervently addressed his sister, wishing to answer whether he would choose Renee or the throne. The girl only commented self-assuredly that she didn't expect to see him there. Standing next to Renee, he declared that he did not intend to give up the throne, but even less did he intend to hurt Renee. Iden only thoughtfully noted that he felt a passionate love for her. He just emphatically squeezed his beloved's fingers, declaring that he was not interested in his sister's opinion. He helped the girl stand up and ordered her not to dare speak to Renee in that tone. Iden smiled arrogantly again, waving her hand at the same time. Recognizing that as a farewell sign, they left the walls of the imperial palace. Not wanting to endure his ardor, the girl withdrew her hand and stated that it was no longer necessary to stay together. Looking at his palm, Ishir instantly darkened with fury and warned her not to cross the line. Renee was shocked by his attitude and clearly didn't understand what he meant by the line. Hearing his demand for an explanation for his anger, he replied that evidently she understood nothing. He directly asked the reason for her visit to Iden, but she tried to calm him down, saying that she hadn't said anything. To her astonishment, he quickly approached, telling her that she wrongly believed herself to be someone important. Understanding the reason for his anger, she asked him if he thought she would reveal secret information. And Ishir looked at the girl demanding, listening to the assumption that he feared possible problems. Not wanting to answer, he said that although he had changed, he didn't have the strength to confront Iden. Renee was shocked to hear that she only had to replace Lion until she returned. He believed that even though she was starting to show power, she shouldn't meddle in court affairs. With sadness on her face, she asked if Renee Marsi's was just a replacement for him. The man maintained a telling silence, increasing her disappointment even more. Finally, he grimly began by saying that he did not want to lie to her. After that sentence, she instantly understood that Renee loved someone who didn't feel the same way. Furious, she turned to one side and tried to end the conversation. She directly asked him why she shouldn't do anything for him. Renee declared that she was much better than him, as she possessed both reason and feelings. The young woman fiercely added that even if she ruined her future, he had no right to treat her like that. Seeing how quickly she was walking away, Ishir tried to stop her and convince her that he didn't mean that. Stopping, she told him not to worry, as this relationship benefited her too. Renee only turned around and finally stated that they would simply continue to use each other. Walking away, she felt despair and noticed that the opportunity for a sudden choice had vanished. The girl felt evident bitterness for how poorly she managed to make people understand. To her misfortune, she ran into the princess, who had decided to apologize. She directly stated that it had been wrong to doubt her relationship with Ishir. Iden, with a glint in her eyes, affirmed that she wanted to correct her mistake. The princess insisted on continuing the conversation, as she said she hadn't said everything she wanted to. Placing a hand on the girl's shoulder, she declared that Ishir was deceiving her. As if tempting her, she promised to prove it if she stayed at her house a little longer. Once again, Renee faces the sudden choice of whether the princess will be an enemy or a friend. She immediately remembered that they hadn't finished talking because of Ishir's appearance. The girl tried to find out the man's sympathy level, but the system still showed nothing. Iden noticed Renee's hesitation, after which she, tense, asked her to wait. She was surprised when the princess stated that she had really changed a lot. Hearing that before she would have rejected her immediately, the girl remembered that her character wouldn't even listen to Iden. Now, she clearly felt that she could trust neither Iden nor Ishir. She just slyly told her to think and understand for herself that all her brother's promises only give temporary sweetness. Being very close, she added that the girl would not regret it if she chose her. To her surprise, Renee immediately grabbed her by the shoulders and declared that she refused. The girl smiled disconcertingly, catching the princess totally off guard. Their relationship instantly worsened, and Iden fixed a deadly stare straight ahead. Upon hearing her request for an explanation of the reason, the girl honestly replied that only a fool would refuse him. Despite everything, with a sense of duty fulfilled, she declared that Renee Marseilles trusted him, and she promised to trust her instincts. The girl clearly felt that if she didn't know the right answer, she could still trust Renee herself. She instantly received a notification that her relationship with Ishir reached 357 points. A couple of days later, she was reflecting again on what happened in her room. Upon hearing the Lord of Temptation's question about why she didn't choose Iden, she replied that she was strange, although closer to her spirit. The girl tried to calm the avalanche of thoughts, thinking that, anyway, she was going to leave that place. In her previous life, she had entered the novel in her own body and with her own soul. In the novel of the Huntress, she didn't think about the original, since she remained in her body. But now the situation was different. Her soul was trapped in someone else's body. She knew she couldn't do whatever she wanted. It wasn't her body after all. Instantly, she imagined someone taking over her body and doing as they pleased. Fury invaded her when thinking about that person quitting her job in her place. That is exactly why she wanted to be respectful of Renee's feelings. She immediately thought about what was eating at her. Ishir's sympathy indicator, 157 points. She didn't understand how one could speak like that to someone for whom you feel so much sympathy. Renee also remembered the main mission, the one that had been worrying her for a long time. Not wanting to feel that anguish anymore, she suddenly got out of bed. The girl decided to focus on recovering her reputation and wanted to check how it was doing. She didn't like the result at all, because it was still on the floor below zero. Renee thought, with frustration, that she had only achieved it after the engagement and clearing the charges. She knew Ishir's influence had a limit, so she had to improve her image by herself. The girl started thinking about options, and one of them was completing a mission. The second was a rather ineffective method, debunking rumors and stopping being the villain. Thus, she arrived at the third option, which forced her to obtain spectacular results. Mentally, she started reviewing the events from the moment of her reincarnation. In the original story, her character did not find the suicide note and was accused. She couldn't defend herself completely either, and Said Ansarad didn't help her. Unlike now, she remembered that even the slightest difference could change everything. In her previous life, she used her knowledge of the novel, but now she has nothing. The young woman felt confused, not knowing which path to take now. Finally, she came to the conclusion that this time she would follow her own path. Meanwhile, Sidin Ansarad continued to suffer nightmares after becoming a sword master. Fear and anxiety tormented him incessantly, waking up in a cold sweat every night. However, this time, instead of a nightmare, he felt peace and slept soundly. He remembered that he had already felt something similar the day he met Renee for the first time. The girl smiled happily at him, extending her hand to touch his face. Astonished, Seddon stared intently at the young woman, as an intense blush rose to his cheeks. Renee told him to sleep while she kept watch, smiling at the thought that she had already been doing it for a couple of hours. Only a few hours ago, the girl had been surprised to find him sleeping soundly. Wishing to wake him up and prevent him from having a nightmare, Renee carefully extended her hand towards his hair. She was amazed at how his face had acquired a healthy tone instead of the sickly pallor from before. Renee, uncomfortable, hugged herself, assuming it would be best if he kept sleeping a little longer. Suddenly, the thought of how incredibly handsome he looked while sleeping invaded her. Although his dark hair was common in her past life, here it seemed different, special. She felt that Sidon was a person, standing on the edge between nostalgia and the unknown. Seeing that he woke up and said that watching him sleep was not the best show, Renee playfully tapped his nose. Somewhat embarrassed, he asked if he could also watch her while she sleeps. He smiled sweetly when the girl immediately answered negatively to his question. Rin looked tiredly at Seaheart when he insisted on knowing the reason for her visit. The girl shyly looked away and asked what would happen if everyone knew she was a sword master. He replied that if she said it calmly, no one would believe it, considering her a disgrace. She agreed with him, adding that she wasn't going to tell until she achieved something important. Sayard assured her that if she told everyone, they would stop looking down on her. Renee nervously looked at the man when he brushed her palm and told her she would have more work. Significantly reducing the distance, he asked if she would feel bad if she couldn't see him often. The girl looked ahead indifferently, sunk in a sea of reflections. She immediately recalled the painful hours in the tower when the turning point arrived. She asked herself over and over if it was worth trying so hard to go back home. Just when she lost all hope, she received an offer from the system. They offered her to save everyone by clearing the tower and then return to her world. She accepted the offer and found new hope. The death of her companions no longer affected her. On one occasion, she ordered a comrade to stop crying. They had to move forward. She trembled upon hearing her commander say that tears wouldn't resurrect anyone. She, disappointed, asked if they were comrades, given his total indifference. Upon hearing it, she didn't understand why this was happening, if she was only trying to save them all. Finally, she moved forward, understanding that her life and theirs were no longer worth anything. Those memories were the reason Seiden's words impacted her so much. A man immediately distracted her, noticing how pale her face had become. She instantly pulled her hand away, grimly saying she was just thinking. Seiden asked if he had bothered her, but she quickly tried to change the subject. He hopefully asked what he should do when she asked him for help. Renee requested a very complex task for her mercenary guild. He accepted, but asked to reserve the right to choose the reward for completing it. After accepting, she immediately heard the question of whether she wouldn't worry about him getting hurt. Upon hearing the answer, he smiled, adding that he felt the same way. After some time, Renee decided to find out why he suddenly wanted to obtain the title of Marquis. He unexpectedly replied that it irritated him that the prince was lingering around her. Seiden finally decided to reveal the reason and tell the story of his life. He recounted that he was an orphan, abandoned on a battlefield, forced to wield a sword to survive. In search of better weapons and a safe haven, he decided to become a mercenary. Over time, he founded his own guild along with other mercenaries. He said the title was mandatory for him and that he hated the restrictions imposed by the aristocrats. Upon hearing the question of why she had rejected him, he simply replied that everything had been in vain. The man added that he lived for a long time without direction, like an insatiable spirit, seeking only power. He didn't even understand why he had achieved everything, but suddenly, he simply got fed up. Among the people, many tried to understand his motive, but he only sought excuses. In the end, he summarized it all, calling his life a regrettable story. Renee clearly disagreed, as she herself had felt something similar. Despite her joy at being understood, he affirmed that that internal void finally ended. The man suddenly knelt before her and confessed that everything changed when he met her. He added that, for that very reason, he was willing to give everything for her, without hesitating for a second. Seiden, grateful, pressed his hand against her face, telling her she could take everything and use it as she pleased. Days later, rumors began circulating in the capital about a dragon in the neighboring kingdom. Everyone was in shock, thinking some madman had awakened the dragon, making the rumor stronger. It was like a spark in a dry field, spreading voraciously among the others present. The young woman who started the rumor quickly returned to Seiden to inform him of everything that had happened. He simply nodded in silence, calmly spinning a blue rose between his fingers. As the sower of these fruits, Seiden dedicated them to the most precious person. But Renee became furious upon seeing on the prize list that Seiden would dedicate himself. That same day, the girl showed her discontent thoroughly by being near him. She asked him directly what the hell he was thinking when offering such a reward. Renee furiously cut vines while he tried to justify himself, saying no one else could do that task. Seiden smiled uncomfortably when she, indignant, asked him why he had announced to everyone that she was his master. A few days ago, he was discussing this topic, insisting that there would only be 3 participants in the expedition. He declared that, for the battle, they would need someone who had reached the sword level. As everyone imagined, the first participant would be Crown Prince Ishir. They were just about to talk about the second participant when Sayedin smiled widely. Speaking of his master, everyone was shocked to learn that the mercenary king has a master. Renee was annoyed by the scandal over the rumor of a hidden sword master. She felt internal dissonance when Sidin reminded her that was what she wanted. Insisting on the importance of order, she thought she should have mentioned the stranger. The man instantly rejected her words, saying it was invaluable to call her that. Renee declared that, despite everything, she was not going to give up the reward. Growling annoyed, the girl ordered him to consult her next time. He smiled, saying that this way he would achieve what he wanted, even though he acted on his own. After that, the girl couldn't help but mention how perceptive he was. He said he just wanted to help, but still generated some doubts. Changing the subject abruptly, the young woman lunged forward, asking him to be careful. To her surprise, Sade came very close and told her that if she didn't like it. He didn't either. With a sweet smile, the man held the vine over the girl's head, enchanted. Renee didn't seem to enjoy his sudden attention and didn't understand anything at all. She insisted on asking him if it was true that he had offered himself as a prize to be able to help her. The girl's eyes widened in astonishment when he confessed that he wanted to show that he was by her side. Zaid continued to smile radiantly, noticing the state of shock Renee was in. They resumed the path, discussing the mission that awaited them and the details of the dragon. After analyzing the characteristics of the monster, Renee instantly doubted whether his plan was good. The man felt a chill when she suddenly asked if Ishir would join them. Renee was furious. How dare he show up just when they were finishing off the dragon? Suddenly, the girl wondered, did I ever actually like this guy? To her surprise, Sayedin asked her directly if she liked him. How audacious. He gently took her hand with his fingertips, and on top of that, he tells her he has a conscience. Pained, he asked her sadly why she didn't like him. How dramatic. The girl froze when she realized he was so handsome he could make anyone cry. Unable to resist that sincere gaze, she herself felt a deep blush. Trying to escape the prison of his eyes, she clumsily replied that she already knew about his conscience. Renee thought to herself that precisely because of that, she had to be fair to him. The girl knew that what they had was impossible, as one day she would return to her world and leave him. Sigdian didn't understand the reason for the apologies. Upon hearing her apologize sadly, Renee only thought that she was apologizing for becoming attached, knowing that she couldn't reciprocate his feelings. Arbel, the head of Princess Idin's night order, interrupted their tender moment. The woman cautiously stated that they ran the risk of angering the dragon if they advanced. She barely managed to turn around and insist on advancing when her subordinates scattered into positions. Alone, Arbel thoughtfully rubbed the back of her neck. She still didn't understand how she had gotten there, but she remembered an episode from the princess's rooms. Like a bloodthirsty lioness, she was furious that they had accepted the prince into the mercenary king's group. Idin understood that if she managed to obtain the dragon's heart, she would undoubtedly be the next emperor. In a fit of rage, she smashed a bottle over Arnell's head and desperately declared that she couldn't stay quiet. Gathering her hair into a bun, the princess coldly added that she had to stop Ishir. Approaching her subordinate, she told her that not even two sword masters would survive a battle with a dragon. Throwing a knife to the ground, Idin ordered her to kill everyone left alive. Arnell still didn't understand how she could order her to attack an exhausted squad after fighting a dragon. She understood that, for her goal, the princess would do anything. The woman remembered her oath, but clearly did not want to stoop as low as she wished. Upon hearing an unexpected greeting, she raised her knife in fright. Renee smiled at his question about who they were and why they had come. Meanwhile, in the hall of the imperial palace, an audience was already being held regarding an important matter. The prince was tired of the discussions about the dragon, as he understood he couldn't act. The princess, impassive, continued to observe the scene with complete coldness. She decided to ask Ishir, who wouldn't stop laughing, what was so funny. He just turned mockingly towards his sister, implying that everything was over. He affirmed that they only cared about the throne and forgot about the citizens. Edding fell silent when he mentioned that they had lost contact with the head of the order. He gently hinted at the importance of the disappearance of someone like that at this moment. The sister snapped back that the location of her personal knight was none of his business. Ensure counterattacked, asking if she was trying to control him and if that wasn't an abuse of power. The young woman looked at her brother with contempt when he ordered her to express her opinion. He was dissatisfied with her answer, as she proposed traveling across the empire. The shouts of the subjects reached their ears until the emperor abruptly silenced them. Ashtar von Ramdish declared with annoyance that he was sick of all this. He immediately embarrassed those present, surprised that they were called pillars of the empire. Idun, smiling, revealed that she had sent her people to the dragon's lair as imperial defense. The man observed her keenly, demanding that she not lie to him. Even so, he added that if she hadn't done anything, his disappointment would have been even greater. The emperor addressed Ishir, commenting that lately he had been behaving strangely. He brusquely declared that Renee Martinez was causing him more problems than Idun, and Ishir tried to defend her, insisting that she wasn't someone he should talk about like that. This only made the emperor laugh, further confirming the young man's arrogance. He abruptly approached his son and grabbed his face, demanding he look him in the eyes. And Ishir only returned a look loaded with pure hatred. Ashtar felt a radical change in his son, who had never talked back to him before. After letting go, he told him that if he longed so much for the throne, he must prove that Renee was good for something. He threatened that if he failed, his sister, inept with the sword, would occupy the throne. Thinking about usefulness, Ishir instantly remembered Renee's question about whether he was just her tool. The man continued pondering why he suddenly remembered those words. Meanwhile, Arnell was already trying her best to find out who was in front of her. She immediately supposed it was Halland, who had altered his appearance. Renee pointed at the sword with her finger, asking if she really wanted to use it. Arnell immediately went on guard when the girl in front of her started removing her hood. Finally, she was completely shocked when she realized who was standing in front of her. The mysterious stranger turned out to be the famous Renee Marsiz, accompanied by Sidon Ansarrad. The girl hid her sword with shame when the other one immediately bombarded her with questions. She replied that she had managed to inform Halland about her whereabouts. Renee was curious to know who could have attracted Halland's attention, but she was an inept minion of Idun. Arnell declared that she was on the border, not in the territory itself, surprising Renee with her stupidity. Her face contorted with doubt as she frantically thought about what she had heard. Renee understood that she knew it, but she couldn't disobey Idun's orders. Deciding to take action, she declared that she had simply been lucky and resorted to magic. Summoning the magic sword, she finished by saying that she found it first, not the dragon. It turned out to be the Varuna sword, created by the Queen of Waves and Healing. The girl immediately activated the victorious sword's ability, preparing for the fight. Instantly, she met with Sidon's admiration and Arnell's surprise. Everyone knew perfectly well that Renee was the only one who did not possess magical abilities. The young woman instantly felt the danger warnings and prepared to repel the attack. She perceived the true scent of the beast, expressing an unbreakable malice. He declared that he was following a rat and didn't expect to find anything interesting. Renee was shocked when he called her an outsider, expelled from all worlds. The dragon also addressed Sidon, calling him the one who exists but is no longer here. The girl became alert, not understanding who the dragon was talking about. She remembered her astonishment over Sidon's absence in the book. The pieces fit. Renee immediately tried to talk to the dragon, expecting the attack. She barely asked if he knew anything. When he struck the ground with his tail, she reacted in time, raising a dome and imprisoning the dragon. Trying to understand why he attacked, she only heard that she was not from this world and must leave. Renee threw new chains at him and ordered him to stop talking nonsense. The dragon was once again oppressed by the chains, strangling its neck. Sidon rushed forward, anticipating the dragon's new attack. He was trying to stay upright, driving his sword directly into the ground. Everything happened so fast that Renee couldn't help the man. The dragon's force immediately threw him a great distance away. Upon receiving the direct attack, he felt he couldn't move, although he tried to defend himself. Seeing the dragon preparing again, the man thought it was a curse. Sid crouched down, feeling the enemy's fiery breath over him. Just as he was bidding farewell to life, Renee protected him. The young woman stopped the enemy's attack, protecting herself and Sid under a dome. The chained dragon asked her why she defended him, feeling nothing for him. The exhausted Sid was also surprised by what was happening. She ordered him not to move and to stay inside the barrier. The girl swiftly headed towards her common enemy, determined to end their battle. She appeared serene, as she noticed her stats were lower than his. Renee instantly prepared to stop the dragon's attack, part of a constellation. In the blink of an eye, she clenched her fist, ready to deliver the final blow. With a straight punch to the jaw, she knocked him out, proving without a doubt that she would win. The exhausted dragon admitted her strength, after which she asked him if he recognized her. Towering over the dragon, she ordered him to explain how he had managed to identify her. He replied that he wanted to see who woke him up and discovered her fated soul. She was surprised by the way the dragon referred to her, as if she had altered destiny. She insisted that he leave this world, as he was not strong enough to bear her presence. Renee replied that she also wanted to leave, as she had not come by her own will. He only mumbled thoughtfully that she too was subject to an immense power. She cautiously crossed her arms, preparing for whatever he might add. He hinted that, because of her, he could no longer hibernate until she left. Renee caught the dragon by surprise by asking if he wanted to ask her to follow him. She immediately supposed that he was seeing a being as interesting as her for the first time. It seemed that she herself was beginning to be bothered by his blatant desire to follow her. In the end, she caught him and decided to take him with her on her journey, without further ado. Her companions were open-mouthed, seeing her capture a light dragon with such ease. Renee immediately approached her trophy, ordering him to introduce himself. He replied coldly that he would not reveal his name to those who do not live 100 years. Arrogantly, he suggested they continue calling him Hallen, without further ado. Sidian was direct and asked him why he had brutally murdered innocents 1,000 years ago. Hallen disagreed that those people were innocent. They would not understand his guilt. In response, he only asked if dragons could understand him. Renee was thoughtful when he said that the only thing allowed for dragons was the truth. She immediately remembered her last conversation while healing Sidian. She asked him to explain what he meant when he spoke of that man. The dragon declared that he was not created by Balua, but he is different, as he is not accepted in any world. Meanwhile, he reaffirmed that dragons have no right to take lives. The other just smiled, replying that Sidon had shed more blood than he himself. Without looking away, she asked him if that was the reason he had attacked him. Understanding that the situation was getting out of control, the girl ordered them to focus on the future and forget the past. Sidon did not agree, but she, firmly, decided to settle the matter once and for all. She told him directly that if he wanted to kill that dragon, he should tell her clearly. Holland was shocked to see that she was willing to destroy him at Sidon's request. Reflecting a bit, he smiled sweetly and said that, as always, he would follow her will. Renee also smiled, while the dragon was outraged that they were deciding in front of him. He thought to himself if people, when looking at him, felt the same helplessness he felt now. That night, Arwen couldn't sleep. Her head was filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. She still couldn't understand how the shame of the Marquis clan could be like this. Arwen couldn't believe that she was the one who defeated the dragon, and she is the third master sword of the Empire. She knew this would be the day of Iden's tragic downfall, when everyone discovers about Renee. Fury consumed her, as she felt the true greatness of that young woman. Arwen thought about talking to her upon waking, but she put a barrier on her tent. The girl knew she couldn't just wait there and waste time. She even asks Sir Ansarad what she should do to save the princess. He, impassive, only replied that she must seek Renee's forgiveness. Arwen understood that it wouldn't be easy, as she would have to reveal the princess's plans. The girl was confused, as it might be the only way to save her. The next morning, Renee was overflowing with energy and enjoying the weather. She was surprised at how haggard her companions looked, sleepless for different reasons. The dragon, suspiciously, asked her how she had managed to sleep after yesterday's events. Renee calmly replied that all the necessary conditions for it had been met. Finally, she decided to ask him what his plans were and what he intended to do. She hadn't finished the sentence when smack, her mouth was sealed with magic instantly. Breaking the restraints with frustration, she asked him telepathically what he feared. Thinking Halland wasn't that foolish, he replied directly, "Nothing." Immediately after, he began transforming water into objects, reminding her of her recent question. Settling into a newly created chair, Renee announced that she had a plan. She showed him a mirror, assuring him that he must reclaim his dragon body. Days later, the entire capital was celebrating the victory over the dragon. Soon, llamas paraded under the triumphal arch, displaying the main trophy. Everyone couldn't stop commenting on how the hell Renee managed to do this. Meanwhile, the young woman watched the scene with a smile from the rooftop. She annoyedly rejected the proposals of her constellations, divided by the rumors. But the one who irritated her the most was Ishir, proclaiming himself the great victor. It enraged her that he took credit, arriving when everything was over. She knew few would believe that she, precisely she, had captured the dragon. Renee decided the best course of action was to accumulate reputation points anonymously, using the press. The girl sank into her thoughts, admiring the shine of the scales in the sun. Despite not being the real Hallen, the beauty of his body fascinated her. A short while before, she had promised to bring a similar dragon corpse from the demon world. He was surprised by her idea, knowing that entry is forbidden for a common human. She simply replied coldly that she never said she would go personally. The girl instantly utilized her ability to summon an item from her constellations. Renee mistakenly selected the inventory of the Lord of Temptation and was amazed by its contents. The girl froze, realizing she had almost made a grave mistake. Determined to set an example, she summoned a claw in exchange for half of her daily power. The man examined the extended object, wondering where the hell she got it from. Renee replied modestly that she had her contacts to obtain the body. He was surprised that she decided to return it after using it. She honestly replied that, however immoral it might be, she wouldn't insult him like that. The dragon clearly hadn't expected her to show such understanding. He felt her being ashamed, understanding that it was probably the body of a relative. Renee said she would give him the corpse when she finished, and then she would bury him. She also handed him a recently summoned dragon claw. The girl smiled, knowing she didn't really need it. It was better that he had it. She liked seeing how warmly Holland thanked her. Unlike the girl, her older brother lived his entire life without a single dark stain. They always valued him immensely for his impeccable appearance, character, and status. Despite this, his greatest weakness was always his sister, Renee Marsize. She was his complete opposite, which is why the Duke raised her like a puppet. He also minimized her education, believing it would be easier to control her that way. Even when she asked to study, her father always told her to let it be. Young Auntie, since childhood, envied Renee, as he suspected absolutely nothing. While he strived and trained daily, Renee got everything without effort. It always seemed to him that she received more love than him, who tried so hard. The young woman remembered when he called himself her brother, and didn't know when they became so close. Auntie thoughtfully analyzed the situation at the ball, honoring the victory over the dragon. Fatigue continued to plague him. He couldn't shake it off. He accidentally overheard a conversation about Renee and became curious about who this bold person was. They also mentioned that Saran Sured did nothing but follow the girl everywhere. The ladies shamelessly talked about how Renee had managed to charm two men. A chill ran down Auntie's spine when they got to the rumor about her reputation. They fell silent suddenly, terrified when they saw the Duke burst through the door. He stated bluntly that he didn't want to eavesdrop, but he had the right to intervene because it affected his family. He stopped them in their tracks when they said they didn't want to offend the Marquis house. They lowered their gaze upon hearing that Renee didn't deserve to be judged by people like them. The ladies were disconcerted when, suddenly, he admitted that Renee wasn't a gift. In short, he said that she didn't deserve this despite her young age. He threatened that if they didn't stop spreading rumors, they would be expelled from the capital. Throughout that time, Renee secretly observed them and listened to the entire conversation. That same night, she met Kirill, who was surprised to see her appear. The girl, elegantly dressed, said she was late due to the weight of her dress. Renee had been absent from home this whole time, causing real chaos. Upon hearing his question, she declared that he would have to deal with the consequences if she disappeared. Kirill accused her of having lost touch with reality and reminded her that she was a common person. Not wanting to answer uncomfortable questions, the girl said she didn't see Ishir or Sidon. Kirill, however, pointed out the side where her beloved was. He explained that all those people surrounding him were just waiting to snag some leftovers. Auntie suddenly appeared and blurted out, "Where the hell have you been all this time?" He mentioned that her behavior was generating very strange rumors, but stopped mid-sentence. He looked at her annoyed when she said those rumors were false. What audacity! Turning away, he declared unconvincingly that he had heard them by chance. Then he rubbed his forehead, exhausted, and concluded that everything was due to her continuous disappearances. Now she is the official fiancée of the prince. She should take better care of her image, he added. Kirill tried to defend Renee, but she interrupted him, calming the tension with her brother. The siblings were wide-eyed seeing the girl, accept the criticism so calmly. Inside, she knew she wouldn't be acting like this if she hadn't witnessed that scene. Seeing his clumsy attempts to protect her, the girl remembered her family in that world. Her brother wasn't as corrupt as Auntie, nor as sweet as Kirill. Despite the disputes, strong family ties reigned among them. The girl hadn't thought about her brother in a long time, but now she missed him terribly. However, Auntie irritated her again, asking what was wrong with her. Not wanting to continue the conversation, she declared she was going about her business. Amidst a huge crowd, Renee desperately tried to guess how to proceed. She knew she could easily push everyone away, but a disaster would occur. The girl finally tried to push her way through the crowd, apologizing politely. She barely managed to advance when suddenly she was surprised by a scene. Suddenly, an explosive option. Two men running towards her, ready to be chosen. The girl, visibly displeased, foresaw the inevitable conflict approaching. The system forced her to choose in 3 seconds, threatening to deduct 20 reputation points for Sidon. But by choosing Ishir von Ramdish, those 20 points would return in her favor. What dilemma! Ren wished the earth would swallow her. She clearly did not want to make such a crucial decision. Understanding she had to act, the girl decisively lunged forward. She activated her sharpened senses ability, creating an illusion of slowed time. She immediately summoned the constellations, demanding options and solutions. The evil bloodlord proposed choosing Ishir, prioritizing an impeccable reputation. The Queen of Waves and Healing urged her to consider feelings and choose Sidon. The Lord of Temptation insisted on solitude, as he wanted her to choose him. However, she also yearned for solitude, so she agreed with him. After making her decision, the girl deactivated the ability, returning time to its normal course. In the end, Renee chose Ishir, following the dictates of her own reason. The young woman mentally asked Sidon for forgiveness, knowing that with him she would lose all reputation. Ishir firmly hugged the girl around the waist and told her he would not allow her to fall. Renee's gaze immediately fixed on the forced smile of the rejected man. Her soul twisted as she understood that he was only looking at her, pretending everything was fine. Turning around, she tried to distract herself with trivial conversation with the prince. He affirmed that everything was going wonderfully, as they planned to minimize Master Sidon's role in capturing the dragon. He instantly proposed dancing, but she wasn't pleased at all. Ishir subtly hinted that he didn't like dancing either, but he felt obligated by others. Realizing it was inevitable, the young woman agreed to dance one song with the man. He decided to apologize for telling her last time not to get involved in the political struggle, and Shir honestly admitted that her intervention had benefited him politically. Renee decided to remind him about the search for Lion, which they hadn't discussed in a long time. Upon hearing his claim that he wasn't trying hard enough, Shir asked why she was so worried. She sharply reminded him that the girl had disappeared, and it was unknown if she was alive or not, and Shir coldly stated that the Renee he knew wouldn't have bothered looking for her. He also added that she had changed too suddenly, as if she had transformed into someone else. The man's gaze turned icy as he looked behind her. Just behind the girl in the distance was Sade, watching the couple longingly, and Shir coldly declared that she had obtained the most valuable and accurate weapon. He also mentioned her attitude towards him, which also differed from her usual behavior. She directly asked why her changes bothered him so much, since it was a good thing for him. The man abruptly dragged her to dance, saying he didn't like it at all. Gripping her wrists, he said he could tolerate her behavior and much more. Despite this, Ishir added that he was concerned about the changes in her soul. Unable to bear it, Sade quickly left the hall. Renee tried to break free from the unpleasant embrace, understanding he was doing it on purpose. She finally succeeded, yes sir, after landing a brutal punch to his stomach. The girl resumed dancing energetically and admitted that she had changed. She declared that she was stronger and smarter, and took the opportunity to clarify that she is not in love. She spun him around forcefully and asked, "Why are you behaving so brazenly?" Renee let him go, saying that everything has a limit, and so does her patience. Upon leaving the place, the girl could finally take a deep breath. To her surprise, she ran into Sidon, who was waiting for her smiling among the trees. Sitting beside him, Renee asked if what she had seen had affected him. She wasn't surprised when he replied that he would say no, but that he was missing many things. He understands that she does it for her plan, but he cannot control his feelings. Sidon suddenly slumped over, apologizing sheepishly for his words. He looked at her amazed upon hearing that she knew his true feelings. Renee's heart skipped a beat when she turned and saw the man's crimson face. She knew it was a huge risk, but sometimes you have to let yourself go a little. The girl had only one chance to test the waters and had to decide. She couldn't help but wonder why his feelings affected her so much. Realizing that curiosity made her look foolish, Renee chose Sidon Ansarrad. Blushing, she returned to reality, responding to her companion's call. Suddenly, she moved closer to him. Upon learning about the system notification, restraining herself due to internal tension, she was still trying to understand the final score. Seeing Renee's distress, Sidene asked what was wrong. Upon hearing that she was just tired, he gently stroked her forehead, understanding her state. Sidene grew flustered when she abruptly asked if anyone had ever liked him. She asked him what she should do to confess her feelings to a person. Renee couldn't bear that feeling of affection, as she had never loved anyone before. Sidene watched the girl with concern, not understanding how to help her. Declaring that she looked pale, the man covered her with his cloak. She replied that it was now really important for her to understand the answer to his question. He replied with a smile that even he didn't know, as he never had the opportunity to think about it in his life. The man gently took a strand of her hair and declared that he could only say one thing. Renee was mesmerized by his gaze, brimming with tenderness. She was even more struck when he sensually approached her from behind, promising to find that answer. Renee felt flooded by the emotions evoked by his warm and loving voice. She felt like he had become a true comfort to her, making her tremble. After finishing the mission, she left in search of the tower to get the next task. Renee felt disappointed, as she was required to develop a relationship with Ishir and provoke deeper feelings in the characters. In a single night, the young woman returned to the capital, thinking that the reward had seemed strange to her from the start. She involuntarily compared it to past life experiences, where such a thing had never been offered to her. Her indignation knew no bounds, and now every word in the task descriptions generated negativity. What angered her most was the inscription stating that she must respect the plot of the story. She thoughtfully looked at the mark of 350 relationship points with Ishir, not understanding how to surpass that figure. Renee entered the house, refusing to debase herself by crawling before the prince. Inside, she saw the servants busy, flitting all over the palace. The girl immediately suspected, uneasily, that preparations were underway for some feast. She interrupted the conversation immediately, discovering that they were preparing for a reception in honor of the Lord's achievements. Realizing she had scared the maid, Renee calmly asked her to tell her more details. It was like an electric shock when the maid declared that the prince's squadron had annihilated a dragon. She continued, claiming that Auntie was that master swordsman, something the Duke could not announce openly. He presented everything as if Auntie were too modest, forcing Sir Ansarad to lie. She was even more struck by rumors that Sir Ansarad was visiting the duchy too frequently. Renee instantly grasped the danger of that explosive rumor. She suddenly understood that she was the reason for his frequent visits. The biggest threat was headlines appearing about her secret romance with the prince's fiancé. Renee knew well that if she revealed the reason for their meetings, her reputation would collapse irrevocably. She ran to her room, thinking about how to crush those poisonous rumors. To her surprise, she ran into Auntie, whom she had heard about recently. In a second, she jumped over the railing, trying to escape at all costs. Renee's scream echoed throughout the palace, ordering him to stop. Before seeing his sister, Auntie tried to talk to his father, believing everything was wrong. Ashtar declared that he was supposed to be that hero, even if he wasn't really one. In the Ramdish Empire, only the High Command held power. The rest were a nuisance, but they were used through marriages and alliances. Seed Ansarad was the one who rejected all those proposals. Ashtar directly asked what he did all this time, already being a sword master as a youth. Under his father's pressure, Auntie said that the prince and Seed would not remain silent. His father denied it, as the reputation of the Marseilles clan would fall and Renee would suffer. He knew that after the engagement with Renee, the prince had strengthened his positions. He doubted that a commoner could intervene, while the crown prince remained silent. That was the reason why Auntie should stop worrying. Finally, Ashtar said that even Rin was useful, unlike him. It was right then that Auntie started avoiding her. Aware of his reaction, Renee decided to trap him, using an ability that is law in the sea. She immediately flooded the entire space with water, cornering her brother. He tried to escape, but was hit by a furious wave that completely covered him. The girl firmly grabbed him by the tie, asking him why he was fleeing. He tried to lie, saying he remembered something he had left in his office. She directly asked him how he planned to endure in this world, where he would have to lie nonstop. Renee reminded him that he wasn't the hero everyone would believe him to be. The girl looked at her brother with contempt, telling him that, although she didn't love him, she believed he had a conscience. Her harsh words about his lack of intelligence and conscience hurt him deeply. As she left, Renee wished him luck at the next dance. After all, she lay exhausted on the tiles, thinking about destroying everything. She realized that in the capital, she would need a force capable of opposing the Duke. Renee thought her heroine could use a knightly order in the future. In number, it consisted of 200 men, with an initial level of swordsman master. She knew that Auntie also had his own order, but it was too weak. The girl mentally ordered everyone to wait eagerly for her to train them to death. Her flow of thoughts was interrupted by a tall man, dressed in armor. It turned out to be the leader of the higher order, Dylan Max, declaring that this was not the right place for a lady. He added that it was for those who truly wanted to master the sword. She remembered that she was not a stranger, and that she was on her territory. The man said that everyone followed the Balua religion, and most are still waiting for the saint. Renee directly asked him about the doubts she had in the context of the investigation. Changing his mood instantly, he said that he too was waiting for Lion's return. The distant commander was called by another knight of the order. Hearing his derogatory treatment, the girl was stunned by his declaration. Suddenly, she realized that, despite those words, she was still going to be trained. The knights scoffed when she asked how Auntie and Kirill were treated. The smile disappeared from their faces after asking if they humiliated them too. Their gaze darkened when they declared that they were true Marsais, close to the level of sword master. She remembered that in her previous life, there were always people who humiliated the weak. She was astonished by their calculation, thinking that she couldn't do absolutely anything here. Renee reminded them of the rumor about how Auntie and Kirill managed to reach that level. She decided to show them how terrifying the abilities of a girl in Renee's body could be. She bit her finger, shedding thick crimson blood. The knight tried to offer to take her home, but she was unstoppable. She began to draw crimson patterns, determined to show the power of the Marches. Renee activated the ability of the Blood Demon's decree, controlling space. Even the head of the order was shocked by what he saw, clearly not believing it. The girl immediately summoned her sinister fire sword, smiling maliciously. Wielding her sword, she instantly captured everyone's attention. She ordered the bloody cherry blossom to bloom, right in the middle of the field. Everyone was immediately enveloped by the bloody petals, hypnotizing to the horror. Despite the spectacle, the knights felt nauseous from the intense stench of blood. The young woman continued to display her bloody dance, plunging everyone into a trance. To finish, she created a blood butterfly and ordered it to fly. It immediately located the main aggressor and landed on his hand. To his surprise, his entire body protected by the armor began to be covered in torn wounds. The girl used the technique of dancing butterflies, capable of killing anyone. Rena said with amusement that this was a completely different quality. She immediately decided to show off her power to the others, sending even more butterflies to them. Meanwhile, Said and Ishir were already in the vicinity of the training ground. The man stated that such a sinister aura emanated from the field that it was obvious who did it. Said instantly supposed that something dangerous might have happened to her. The crown prince didn't understand what the hell that girl was thinking by creating such a barrier. He realized he wanted to break it, but that would affect those inside. Despite all the warnings, Said decided to enter the barrier anyway. He immediately replied that his life didn't matter. Renee was trapped inside. His action outraged the prince, who now felt obliged to follow him. And Shur was surprised by the total absence of resistance from the barrier. The man felt that everything around him confused him, making him doubt his path. His gaze was struck by strange red butterflies, presaging the crucial. The prince was stunned to the bone upon seeing the princess surrounded by knights. His gloomy gaze returned to normal upon noticing Ishir's presence. Despite his intimidating appearance, he was fascinated by the doubt of whether she belonged to his world. He didn't have time to react when Seed ran in and hugged her tightly. She reflected that if before she wanted to be equally strong, now she was very scared. Renee herself blushed upon feeling his strong hug and his hand squeezing until she trembled. Finally, he separated from her, apologizing for getting close without her permission. The young woman just smiled, stroking his head, noticing that she had made him worry. And Shur hid behind the wall, unwilling to reveal that he had overheard their entire conversation. Sayedin told her directly not to apologize to him, as she belonged to him. The girl shyly asked if he wouldn't ask why she was doing all this here. In response, the man just gently squeezed her hands in his, without thinking much about the answer. He said that when the light goes out, one can know the true essence of a person. Renee looked at him, surprised, when he said in a low voice that he had finally realized it. He just smiled sweetly, thinking that by thinking she might not be there, he plunged into darkness, where he found her essence. After a while, she was still being bothered by apologizing knights. Sayadin immediately suggested that she hit him if he bothered her, and Shur also offered his help, promising to exterminate his entire clan if she wanted. She instantly felt irritation, as she didn't need any of that. Renee quickly turned to the knight, telling him to leave there after what the men had said. The head of the order, wounded and guilty, called her instantly. She just looked at him with disdain, telling him it was better to think about recovering. Dylan Mack put his hand on his chest, apologizing again for his rudeness. The girl directly asked what she was supposed to do with that, if it was all she was capable of. Renee said she didn't need his useless apologies. The girl understood that if she didn't have power, none of them would have apologized. She grew tired of how sadly he begged for forgiveness on behalf of all the knights. He said it wouldn't happen again. When she accused him of dishonoring the Marsai's lineage, he barely tried to flatter her. When a brutal blow from the lady completely stunned him, Renee is determined to take revenge for every humiliation suffered by her heroine. She looked at him with contempt, sentencing that this was his last chance. As soon as they entered the room, the crown prince condemned her for the scene. Renee modestly replied that it had been nothing, that only one person suffered. Inside, she knew it was a lie. A butterfly can kill someone. Ishida exclaimed that it was impossible and felt an unprecedented energy. A quarrel broke out between Sidon and the prince, greatly irritating the girl. In the end, Sidon emerged victorious in the heated argument. He revealed that he verified the ducal invitation and discovered that the young master is the hidden hero of the dragon raid. The crown prince responded, without yielding an inch in the argument. Renee interrupted them again, demanding that they leave the young master alone. She reminded Ishir that he coveted the throne, and ruining relationships was not an option. Suddenly, a doubt assaulted him. Did she actually care about his position? Renee decreed that it was a condition of the deal, and she kept her word. Taking advantage of the situation, he asked her for a favor as part of the agreement, and Ishir proposed that she accompany him to tomorrow's ball. As his partner, Renee knew she had to improve her image, and there were no reasons to refuse. The young woman sank into deep thoughts, unable to give a simple yes. She finally accepted the proposal, demanding that Auntie not be bothered. Ishir looked at Sayatsin triumphantly. Waving his hand in the process, he merely grimaced, fighting against a whirlwind of emotions. Determined to deliver the final blow, Ishir asked with a smile whom she planned to invite to the ball. Renee suddenly understood everything. She also needed an escort. Season bluntly stated he would go alone, as he didn't need anyone else. Renee's cheeks instantly flushed upon remembering their last private encounter. She didn't understand why her heart was beating so fast, as if she had arrhythmia, something that surprised the queen of the waves. Ishir decreed that, coincidentally, he knew a perfect lady to be his partner. He added that she was calm and beautiful. Besides having an impeccable reputation, Renee reflected on his words, realizing that she was the complete opposite of that description. She immediately imagined Seed, accompanied by a sweet and calm girl. Her heart instantly responded with a sharp and inexplicable pain. Renee was surprised to see Seed take her hand between his and ask for permission. The young woman immediately turned, nervous, saying it was a great opportunity to silence rumors. She decided to make it seem like he visited them so often because he had become friends with Auntie. The prince became sarcastic again, saying that lords must take care of their subordinates. Renee understood where he was going with that. Wanting to belittle Seed, he continued by saying that a mere presence should not be allowed to cause discomfort. The young woman felt irritation and asked him why he said such things. He directly declared that Seed had never helped her and had taken credit for others' achievements. The man began to boil at this blatant attempt to humiliate his honor. Not wanting to hear more, she addressed the prince, forbidding him from insulting Sayatan. And Shur immediately blurted out what would happen if the Empire's hero took her away. The man instantly declared that he had never wished to be a hero. He tensed, however, when Ishir asked what would happen to the princess. The crown prince stated that if she mattered to him, he should suppress his feelings. He didn't manage to finish. When he was interrupted by the glacial gaze of the furious young woman, Sayatan instantly became uneasy when she ordered him not to speak to her pupil like that. Unlike Ishir, she was surprised to see him suddenly stand up. The man stood up and apologized for taking up so much of her time. Renee was confused by the suddenness of his decision to leave the group. Sidon stopped a centimeter from the door and suddenly said he forgot something. Taking advantage of the pause, she tried to offer to accompany him, but he refused. He sadly declared that he didn't want to keep damaging her reputation as before. Sidon believed she was kind because she was his student, but he misunderstood everything and almost hurt her. Renee tried to explain that it wasn't like that, but she met his gaze full of longing. She was petrified when he gently took her hand and brought it close to his lips. She couldn't react when he immediately pulled away, making her want to run after him. Renee urgently reminded herself that the mission was what was important, but something held her back. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had to run after Sidon. To her surprise, Ishir slammed the door shut, making her his prisoner. Renee was devastated. All this time, he had only dedicated himself to humiliating and provoking the other man. She didn't understand why Ishir opposed their relationship, until she doubted whether he truly saw him as just a pupil. A tense silence, loaded with the prince's jealousy, took over the atmosphere. Renee tried to escape, but he instantly cornered her, begging her not to leave him and not go with Zietsin. She tried to make him understand that he had nothing to do with all this. He admitted that his marriage was a sham, but he couldn't help getting involved. The girl was bewildered by his sudden and inexplicable whims toward her. Before she could react, his face transformed into a menacing mask, and Sheer refused to admit that he was starting to feel something for the young woman. He covered his face with his hand, feeling terrifying changes occurring inside him. He clearly knew that every time she smiled at another, he desired to annihilate him. The man didn't want her to give her attention to anyone, and that's why he hated Sidian. Seeing the feelings bloom between the two of them, Ishir's reason became clouded. Threateningly, he cornered Renee against the wall, as if finally unleashing his true desires. Ishir was totally out of control and openly threatened to act as his heart dictated. Renee tried to push him away, feeling that he was going crazy, but he wouldn't let her. To her surprise, the system almost screamed about the very high level of danger due to his feelings. Just now, upon understanding that everything was getting out of control, the girl felt a real threat to her life. In the end, the girl managed to escape Ishir's hands and headed to her mansion. There she ran into a new mission. She had to listen to the promise of love from one of the candidates. Furthermore, Renee was furious because she could no longer see the status window of the other heroes. Although she was the strongest, she couldn't trust anyone without knowing their sympathy level. The girl suffered from terrible mistrust, a consequence of her countless reincarnations. She still remembered the blatant betrayal of the Tower Master. What infamy! Throughout her life, she had been betrayed countless times, always with a different excuse. No matter how strong she was, Renee couldn't predict whether they would betray her or not. It was frustrating. Therefore, the only thing she trusted was the sympathy window. It always showed her the probability of betrayal, depending on the value that appeared. Renee was beside herself due to the problems with Sidon and Ishir's strange behavior. What a mess! She remembered his expression again, the one that revealed his hidden feelings. She still refused to believe that genuine sincerity existed in this world. Seed's image immediately appeared in her mind, radiating honesty. She ended up accepting its existence, although she dismissed it as something ephemeral and fleeting. Inevitably, she thought about not completing the mission and staying in that world. She forgot the faces and voices of her family. She only longed to return for her pet. She knew that upon returning, she would be a simple office worker, not a noble lady. Renee finally accepted that this way there would be no emotional games or affairs, and fell asleep. The girl slept peacefully, unaware of the calamity that was approaching. The evil bloodlord was trying to wake her up. The system was furious. He shook her in desperation, terrified, but she didn't react. The system stopped him dead, instantly blocked and initiating an update. In the morning, Renee woke up as if nothing had happened, completely perplexed by the bloodlord's block. The girl, determined to know why, went to the aquatic maid. To her great astonishment, none of the constellations answered her questions. Renee was stunned after reading the system notification. She couldn't believe it. She followed the instructions and went to the mission menu, where the penalty was supposedly located. She was shocked to discover that the punishment involved the termination of her contracts with the constellations and the loss of all her privileges. Now, the girl had to complete the task as soon as possible and achieve what the system demanded. She was just about to get angry when she heard the voices of the maids behind the door. Renee struggled to control her emotions, knowing she had to complete the mission. Immediately, several maids entered her room, ready to dress her for the banquet. The dazzling sparkle of the luxurious dresses blinded her, struck by their beauty. Renee looked thoughtfully to the side, suppressing her astonishment at seeing her bedroom turned into a fitting room. At that moment, a knight of the order burst into the room, wishing to protect the young woman. Renee was surprised by his fervor, as she normally didn't allow anyone to guard her. The knight confessed that the captain had sent him, and that, upon seeing Renee's true power, he admired her. Observing his behavior, Renee Marsays immediately remembered her fans from her past life. Finally, she returned to choosing a dress, critically examining the options offered. Renee didn't like the maid's tone. Upon saying that it hadn't even been 6 months since they bought those dresses, she rapidly approached the suspicious maid. Pressing her mercilessly, her aura suddenly turned sinister, instilling a paralyzing fear in the woman. Having achieved her goal, Renee, with an unsettling calm, told them they needed to go to the tailor. Shortly after, they were at Carmen's tailor shop, whose visible selection displeased her. The maid grew uneasy upon hearing the order to go to the most famous tailor shop in the city. She trembled even more when Renee deduced that the order actually came from the Duke himself. The young woman accompanying her lunged at the woman, demanding an explanation. To avoid further pressure, the maid agreed to reveal the true situation. She confessed that her father punished her for her disappearance, depriving her of all her money. Renee found the tired excuse her father had cooked up amusing. He didn't want her to draw attention as the prince's fiancée. She needed to be the center first. The young woman turned to the maid again, ordering her to take her to the best tailor shop. She tried to dissuade her, saying no one would sell her a dress without money. Renee, with a triumphant look, showed a bag hiding real riches. In the end, they ended up at the best tailor shop in the capital, called Armidane. The owner of the tailor shop was surprised to see Renee. She thought they wouldn't give her money. She just smiled upon noticing the woman's unease, anticipating a trap. The girl declared that she shouldn't worry. Today, she would pay for everything with her own money. Madame couldn't believe what she was hearing until Renee handed her the mysterious bag. Inside was the valuable scale of a scarlet dragon. The tailor shop owner couldn't believe it. The girl had always depended on her father's money. Even the knight was amazed to see that the lady would pay with such a jewel. She suddenly remembered that the crown prince defeated a dragon and assumed he gifted her everything. Renee was puzzled by her silence and finally gathered the courage to ask why. She knew she couldn't let this opportunity pass and offered to sell her the entire shop. In the end, Renee Marsays bought the entire store, becoming a VIP client. Casually, she passed the rest of the scales to her maid, who was burning with nervousness. Meanwhile, the girl thought about thanking Hallen. Thanks to him, she knew how valuable they were. Not long ago, he gifted her a scale, saying he wanted to compensate her for the fang with something worthy. The girl suddenly remembered that she had over 1 million of those scales in her inventory. The man openly showed her his provisions, hidden in a magical space. Renee was thrilled, expecting him to gift her a very valuable jewel. To her surprise, he offered her a bag of his scales, whose price she didn't know. She jumped upon hearing the story of that man, who enriched several generations. Hallen stopped her before she left, reminding her that he wanted to follow her, as he promised. Renee suddenly felt the agony of decision before the nymph's anger. Renee was surprised when he said he hated scarlet dragons. Not to mention his unrequited love for the king of fire spirits, he paid attention when she proposed an alternative. Thinking he would refuse, Renee suggested she call him when she needed him. His astonishment was immense when he accepted her disadvantageous offer. He replied with a condition, hinting that, as the guardian of balance, he must protect her. Immediately after, he proposed a spell to help her detect her magical powers. The girl's palms burned with a bright fire, emanating directly from her body. Halland began to take his dragon form, enveloping Renee's body with magical symbols. Meanwhile, she only thought, with some languor, about how handsome he was in that form. Upon finishing, he stated that he would wait for the moment when he could be useful to her. After several hours, the time for the main celebration finally arrived. Sejun was already confidently awaiting his companion, with whom he would appear at the ball. This charming young woman was named Marie Gard, the Baron's second daughter. Although the man maintained the conversation, he kept dwelling on what happened earlier. He couldn't stop recalling their first meeting with Renee. After long years of battles, she managed to heal his broken soul, returning it to normal. The day she called him, only her apprentice constantly resonated in his mind. At that moment, his heart broke, as he vehemently longed for his goddess. It could be compared to a blaze that devours the entire forest with its fire. That's how his kindness consumed his soul and body from within, forcing him to be bold. Sidon was forced back to reality when they asked him to show his invitation. He immediately apologized for the trouble and extended his hand towards Marie. The young woman couldn't believe that her companion was Sir Hen Suret himself. Inside her, hope blossomed that he would fall in love, but she knew he wasn't her Prince Charming. Astonishment lit up Marie Gard's face upon entering the enormous banquet hall. She was ecstatic about the attention she received next to Syatsian. The lady immediately decided to ignore the fact that he felt nothing for her. It also didn't go unnoticed by her eyes how handsome her companion was. Noticing her attentive gaze, the man immediately asked if he had done something wrong. Marie clearly felt him drawing a dividing line between them and wondered if someone else could awaken his emotions. Immediately, they directed their gaze forward. Upon hearing about the arrival of Ishir von Ramdish and Renee Martzes, everyone was shocked by how spectacular that couple looked. Marigard felt a whirlwind of admiration, contemplating the elegant young woman. She turned to Syatsian and then saw his devoted and loving gaze. He looked back at his companion when she suggested getting something to drink. The man offered to bring the drinks, secretly wishing to stop looking at Renee. He felt jealous that she was right now with the crown prince. However, despite that decision, his eyes kept searching for her. Finally, with a forced smile, he handed Lady Marie a glass of champagne. At the same time, he felt desperate, as he couldn't control his emotions. Suddenly, an idea struck him. The girl had glanced at him, fleetingly as she passed. Although he thought it was an illusion, his cheeks flushed anyway. While he was lost in thought, Marie unexpectedly bumped into a waiter. Because of this, she spilled her glass of champagne, which flew directly onto her companion's suit. The girl was burning with embarrassment and quickly looked for a handkerchief. She immediately started cleaning his jacket, showing deep regret. Sidian moved away from her, trying to figure out where Renee had disappeared to. Meanwhile, she was already drinking wine in front of the crown prince. Sir Ansarad noticed how far the girl had gone and thought it was better that way. However, something happened that made his eyes open in displeasure. His gaze fixed on how insistent Ishir was in approaching Renee. The man was beside himself, with the jealousy and anger that boiled just by looking at them. He was very surprised when Marie decided to play along and suggested greeting the crown prince. Sidian agreed with her and said they were very close, so greeting them wouldn't be a problem. Finally, a radiant smile lit up his face, and his hand reached out to her. Meanwhile, Renee happily wandered through the hall, reaping endless compliments. The young woman quickly found Ishir and bombarded him with questions about whether they could have a drink. He simply beamed with joy, saying he had brought it had she asked for it. Renee was still looking around for Syard, as he himself wouldn't leave her alone. It didn't go unnoticed by her how adorably he had given her his diamond. Renee was ecstatic to see the delicate, snowflake-like Marie Gard, like a first love. Immediately, she witnessed her cleaning the shirt of her secret love. Involuntarily, the young woman put a hand to her chest, feeling as if she had frozen. She couldn't understand why her chest felt so tight, as if burning embers were cutting off her air. Renee looked at the man uneasily, not fully understanding his feelings. She was even more shocked by the sudden suspicion that her condition was due to arrhythmia. The Queen of the Waves could no longer stand the girl's naivety, unleashing a storm out of indignation. Renee didn't understand the reason for her anger, provoking a strong cascade of reproaches. Not understanding the constellation's behavior, she moved away from Sitin. She audaciously replied that they should enjoy the party when Ishir asked her about her plans. They heard her father's voice, attributing all her achievements to Auntie. The girl was quietly eating cookies when Ishir asked her why she was holding back. The man didn't understand why she didn't want to use her power and reclaim her name. Renee downed a glass in one gulp and said that was his power, not hers. Ishir said he wanted it, but she remained strongly opposed. The girl eagerly held out her glass, affirming that she did not want to depend on him. The man was visibly surprised by the way she used magic to fill her glass. Renee added that he shouldn't worry or rush, as they had already diverted the Duke's goal. Ishir was shocked by how majestic the girl looked at that precise moment. He agreed, noting that no one considered Auntie the protagonist of the party anymore. The girl didn't quite understand what he meant and thought everyone was criticizing her, not admiring her. Ensure unexpectedly declared that she didn't know herself and gently touched her with his hand. He insisted again that she didn't know and looked sweetly into her eyes. The man knew that, in all the gazes directed at her, envy could be felt. Admiring her openly, he said he loved knowing more about her than she knew herself. Renee was forced to interrupt their talk upon seeing Sayat's approaching. The man smiled warmly as he walked accompanied by his companion. Marie, with a sweet smile, thanked the girl for the invitation, praising the party. Renee thanked her politely, commenting on the long journey she had made. The other woman was surprised by the girl's sincerity and asked her to call her Marie. She was impressed by the simplicity with which Renee treated her, asking her to address her informally. Marie openly commented that Sayats had been taking care of her the whole time. Ishir decided to use her words to insinuate to Sayats that he should answer something. Sir Ansarad remained silent, evidently not knowing what to reply. Finally, he confessed his concern that someone else might disturb the lady. Ishir pondered for a moment, taking his words as a clear challenge. After a tense pause, Sidon bowed, announcing that they had to leave. Renee kept watching them leave silently, reluctant to let them go. Suddenly, she bolted. She desperately needed fresh air. Alone, she sighed exhaustedly, resting her forehead on her hand. The young woman was furious at how pathetic and powerless she felt. The Queen of the Waves insisted that she must gather her courage and go to Sidon. She watched him dance with another, hating the uncertainty about his goals. Unable to bear it, she thought for a second that she shouldn't have made him her pupil. Suddenly, she noticed a notification about the time being slowed down by the Queen of the Waves. Renee, surprised, shielded herself from the drops, listening intently to the constellation's words. It had been so long since she heard that soft, tinkling voice, like pure and silent raindrops. The Queen addressed Renee directly, telling her to follow the current her heart indicated. She reminded Renee of the condition she herself had set when receiving the contract. The girl remembered that she was the second constellation to sign a contract with her. However, her first impression was simply horrifying. The Queen used the appearance of Renee's mother, causing her to demand that she change that form. The girl declared that she needed that person, not an image, because it was useless. The Queen of the Waves and Healing immediately complied with her demand, changing her appearance. She didn't understand why the cruel Bloodlord had recommended her to her. The Queen gently touched her face, noticing her discomfort with her. She admitted knowing her, but not knowing how to treat her, so she had to teach her how to love her. The huntress was struck by the lightness with which she spoke of such intimate things. She asked curiously if those were all the contract conditions. The huntress opened her eyes in surprise, observing the water droplets. The Queen replied that it was an extra condition, besides which she only desired one thing. She loomed over the girl, slowly revealing her condition. Renee gazed ecstatically at the constellation, while saying she wanted to paint with happiness the path of tears she was walking. The magical hands of Queen Varuna gave the finishing touches to fulfill her wish. And hers. In the end, she left the girl, returning as if she were the tide. Before leaving, she told her to seek her happiness and not worry about the future. The powerful spirit of Varuna smiled before disappearing completely. She hugged her tenderly, calling her the sea of which so many are proud. Varuna vanished due to a system lock, which enraged Renee. Seed, as if nothing had happened, was standing at the door, foreseeing nothing bad. Renee suddenly opened the door, surprising the man who was there. The girl enthusiastically grabbed his hand and pulled him, asking for silence. She was ready to show her feelings, without fear of the consequences. She didn't care what her feelings for Seed were, and ran into his arms. The man blushed at such a sudden display of affection from the girl. Renee growled with disgust, hearing the anger of the Bloodmaster unlocked by the system. Sidene was visibly surprised by the girl's sudden change of emotions. Still hugging him tightly, she looked at the man distractedly when he suddenly called her by her name. To her surprise, he just hugged her tighter, squeezing her with his hands. The girl's face flushed from the man's sudden tenderness, who declared that it was all his fault. All this time, he had tried not to cling to her so as not to damage her reputation. He gently stroked her head and declared that now he would not give up the opportunity she had given him. Renee struggled between shame and discomfort, and besides, she had no immunity to romance. He declared that he would not leave now, even if she rejected him. Despite her pleas for him to let go, he still couldn't break the embrace. Finally, she broke free from his iron grip, using the excuse that she would hug him again. Seeing her embarrassed face, she realized that he had been expecting that from the beginning. He murmured softly that for that reason he didn't want to let her go. Now she was teasing him. Renee burned with shame, something that also did not escape the man's gaze. He extended his arms to her again, determined that she fulfill her promise. Without much hesitation, she threw herself into his arms, clinging to his chest. Seiden hugged her immediately, as if wishing never to let her go again. The girl felt a strange tremor, flooding her with warmth and tenderness. Despite all the agitation, the girl had never felt so relieved before. Meanwhile, everyone in the room began to notice the absence of two key figures. Squeezing the man's hand, Renee sweetly suggested that they return. Siang declared that he wanted to continue possessing her just for himself and kissed her hand. Renee felt flooded with shame again by his embarrassing words. As soon as she left, she was caught by a furious Ishir. The man cornered her against the wall, demanding explanations as to why she was alone with another. Renee provocatively declared that it shouldn't matter to him who she was talking to. Ishir was stunned by the contempt with which she treated his control. Siang also intervened in the conflict, asking them not to cause trouble. This only angered the man more, as he clearly didn't consider it trivial. Unwilling to give in, he repeated that he was trying to be extremely intimidating. The Renee siblings noticed the conflict, immediately interrupting their conversation. Renee openly found it amusing how they tried to defend their honor. And Sheer was furious when Auntie told him to give orders when he ascended the throne. He fiercely declared that, regardless of the opponent or the cause, the Marquises would defend themselves against anyone who raised a sword. And Sheer instantly created his oppressive and imposing aura, as if wanting to intimidate the two men in front of him. Renee annoyedly understood that at this rate, a real problem would arise. She was forced to use Aligos's ability, which controls the target's abilities and feelings. In this way, the girl quickly took control of the minds of everyone present. Sejun was the only one she released from the influence of this ability. Understanding what had happened, he reluctantly obeyed her order to go home. As a farewell, the man firmly placed his hand on her waist, pulling her toward him. Renee never imagined that he would decide to affectionately kiss her right on the head. The girl was stunned by such a sudden display of affection. Shame instantly overwhelmed her. Seehard smiled sincerely at her reaction and wished her good night, as if enjoying it. In the end, it wasn't difficult for Renee to send the rest of the guests home. After seeing off the last one, she realized it had been a truly exhausting day. She barely moved forward when he called her. She had something to confess to him. The girl couldn't believe her ears when he told her he wanted to congratulate her on her good work today. He didn't want to participate in a party where others' merits are stolen. That's why he was happy about her success. Before, he knew that all this happened by his father's will, and his position as heir was just a piece on the board. He couldn't oppose the party or refuse to participate, but he could delay expressing his stance. That night, he moved forward with determination, dying inside at the feeling of how pathetic he was. Upon entering the hall, he was surprised by how quiet it was. Kirill immediately explained that his father was furious, which had affected the atmosphere. The man immediately located his father in the crowd and noticed his anger instantly. He still couldn't figure out what could have happened during his absence. His brother immediately pointed to Renee, saying that today she was the protagonist. At that moment he praised her, saying she was a proud member of their family, which visibly embarrassed her. She gave him a friendly pat on the back, adding that he was awesome too, and he had even defended her. The girl looked thoughtfully at the sky when he asked if Ishir always acted like that. She was surprised that Auntie told her she didn't have to put up with it for the sake of the family. She always thought he hated her, and he confessed that he wasn't proud of his coldness. He knew he should apologize, but he remembered that she always criticized Lion, and he thought he had gone too far. But in the end, reflecting on what happened, he realized that wasn't the case. He admitted that anger blinded him, and he didn't think clearly. Besides, she had neither money nor power to hire an assassin. Auntie also mentioned how desperate she was looking for Lion after his disappearance. Seeing him walk away, Renee hurriedly called him. He looked at his sister in surprise when she briefly thanked him for his concern. She understood that if her siblings had apologized to the real Renee sooner, she wouldn't have been so unhappy and lonely, feeling a sudden surge of emotions. She asked him if he would say so if she became a disappointment to her family again. The man hesitated to answer, surprised by her question. To Renee's astonishment, he finally replied that it was not so. She smiled when she said she would guide her and do everything possible to prevent her from making mistakes. He himself smiled involuntarily, saying he would help her so she could live well. Meanwhile, the spy Kayla had already arrived at the Shearer Guild. This guild was the best mercenary and scout guild on the continent. People who commit murders and gather information meet in this place. This guild was governed by the light of the Empire, controlling the dark side. The girl reported that they continued to receive eyewitness accounts about Saint Leanne, whom they had seen in the north. It is rumored that she lives in a missing tower and comes down to the village for provisions. Sidon categorically stated that he had not obtained any useful information. She said she would accept the punishment and prevented the information from leaking. The man couldn't stop thinking that he couldn't squeeze any information about Renee out of them. Meanwhile, the girl's morning passed dreaming of Sidon. Suddenly, she woke up in the middle of the climax of her dream. Renee, feeling embarrassed, said she must be crazy to dream such a thing. She was dying of shame and trying to understand why she was thinking about such things. Renee refused to admit she felt anything for the man and made up excuses. The girl sought opinions about the kiss on the forehead and asked Kirill. He immediately started asking who had done that to her and caused a scene. The next target was Auntie, who declared that everything depended on the type of relationship. Upon hearing it was about a professor and his student, he said it was a sign of respect. He immediately ordered her not to talk nonsense when he hinted that they might have feelings. Renee raised her hands when he started to assume she had a master. She was even more surprised when he told her to kill anyone who dared to disrespect her. Throwing a threatening look, he added that he would cover her in any case, showing his radicalism. In the end, this survey did not dispel Renee's doubts, who had never lived as her heart dictated. She inevitably wondered when the system would lock out the water girl. The girl awaited his return, aware that she still had much to tell him. She instantly leaped off the bed, calling for her knight, Isni. Renee decided to ask directly what that kiss with Sid in the guild meant. She was stunned by how painfully familiar that image felt. They were immediately received by a guild employee, asking what business they had. Despite her visible rudeness in her gaze, the girl asked if they had an appointment with the boss they wished to see. Upon hearing a negative answer, she handed them a special ticket with their number in line. They were furious because the line was 30,000 people long. Renee asked them to give a message to Seed and unintentionally thought about what to tell him. All eyes fell on the girl when she asked them to say that Renee Marsize was there. A crowd of employees rushed to meet her, eager to see her. The girl was astonished by so much attention, wondering how they had found out. In the end, she inevitably ended up in Sidon Ansarad's office. A visibly agitated man came out to greet her, shocking everyone with his sloppiness. Everyone burned with amazement, seeing their boss in that state for the first time. Renee instantly convinced him that everything was fine and gently buttoned his shirt. Sidon burned with shame, unable to believe she would do that for him. He immediately apologized for appearing like that, but she instantly reassured him. The employees behind were shocked by how docile he was with her. The man immediately adopted a threatening expression, clearly annoyed by his attitude. Now the girl understood that Sidon apparently was a fearsome boss. Renee remembered she came to ask about that kiss, but she didn't dare. A blushing Sade, with tenderness in his eyes, called her by her name. Before her eyes, that scene, full of delicacy and emotion, came back to life. She changed the subject, saying she planned to move forward step by step. The girl immediately, gently lifted the newspaper from the table with magic. Immediately after, she read a news item about a fencing competition. Meanwhile, a different atmosphere reigned in the Silver Eagle Palace of Princess Idun. Her guest rushed towards her, asking why she had called him. Auntie coldly replied that he knew what would happen if they found out he was there. The man clenched his fists tightly, feeling how difficult it was to deal with her. She asked him directly if his deception of the people was related to his understanding of the truth. Auntie tensed up when he realized she was aware of the deception orchestrated by the Duke. The man became discouraged when the princess hinted that he had deceived everyone. She declared that she wanted to offer him to share this glory and extended him a letter from her father. The young woman with a serene smile examined the tea, waiting for his reaction. After reading it, his hands trembled and began to squeeze the paper convulsively. Seeing his dejected look, she ordered him to swear loyalty to her and win the competition. The man didn't know what to do, as everything pointed to a division in the Marsize family. The next morning, Renee woke up alarmed after the news of an invitation to breakfast with the Duke. Finally, she hastily got ready, knowing that she also had something to discuss with him. She barely managed to reach the table when her father's disapproving gaze greeted her. She noted with irony that, at that family breakfast, the atmosphere was simply deadly. The Duke reproached her for having behaved very insolently at the party. She asked him mockingly what he was having breakfast with such a rude person as her for. Determined to get to the point, she declared that she would participate in the fencing competition. Everyone was shocked by her sudden declaration, which left them stunned. Renee calmly added that she had every right to participate as a member of the Marseilles family. The man immediately raised his voice and told her she should dress nicely and not cross the line. The young woman was not surprised by his protest, but she still didn't plan to give up. She nimbly snatched a bottle from the servant, astonishing him with her speed. After adding strong alcohol to her soft drink, she asked directly why he was doing this. The Duke stared at her and declared that her question was inherently wrong. He added that everything she owned existed only with his permission. Aware that she couldn't miss the opportunity to improve her reputation, she stammered softly in response. He scoffed that a girl who had never held a sword wanted to participate in the competition. Renee accepted that it was ridiculous, since he was the one who had prevented her from touching a sword all this time. Auntie turned dark with fear when she declared that her brothers should have defended her when they made fun of her. She added that when they humiliated her, everyone just stood by watching, and now they were acting this way. The young woman felt that the talent of the real Renee was no inferior to Auntie's or Kirill's. Renee boldly added that he felt envious seeing her talent and feared that his daughter would surpass him. The man radiated genuine fury and pronounced her name severely. He loomed threateningly over the table, declaring that she was still the disgrace of the Marts. Having left the room, he decreed that she could do whatever she wanted, but she would lose her name in exchange. An awkward silence flooded the room, seasoned with the fear of the brothers. Kirill approached her and ordered her to immediately go beg her father for forgiveness. Auntie held his head wearily, aware of the magnitude of the problem. Kirill leaned over the girl, noticing that she did not seem worried about what had happened. Auntie felt uneasy when he asked if she really wanted to leave the family. Renee, exasperated by his concern, firmly stated that she did not depend on her family nor fear his decision.